I woke up on a horse in the rain, wearing heavy armor, with no idea where I was. The last thing I remembered was working overtime at my job, and then suddenly, all these foreign memories flooded into my head. Painful, overwhelming memories that weren't mine. Turns out, I'd taken over the body of someone named Farnell Riendort, a nobleman from a dragon-riding family called House Riendort. The family used to be powerful, flying black dragon banners that made everyone tremble. But now most of their ancient dragons were asleep, and the family had backed the wrong prince in a royal power struggle. The winning side, House Stewart, with their griffin riders and battle mages, crushed our faction. To appease the new king, my family needed a scapegoat. That was me. They stripped me of everything, gave me a worthless title of Viscount, and a ruined territory on the border where a war had been raging for decades against the Druna kingdom. They even took away my dragon companion, Stimp, the one thing that was truly mine. They said it was for safekeeping, but really they were afraid I might use him against them someday. The one thing I did have was a squad of 120 elite magic knights in black armor, riding dragon-blooded warhorses that could breathe fire. And I had something else, some kind of strange ability that let me see information floating next to people, like a video game status screen. Names, loyalties, skills, everything. My knight captain, Barton Ironrock, was loyal and experienced. I could see it right there in his status. That was reassuring, because I knew absolutely nothing about this world and needed someone I could trust. We came upon a ruined town called Bloodraven, and scouts reported about 50 enemy soldiers inside. A small guerrilla squad from Druna with some war beasts and a druid. They were digging around a collapsed dragon god statue, searching for something. My knights outnumbered them and outclassed them in every way, so I gave the order to attack and capture prisoners alive. Before the battle, a scout handed me a strange gold coin found on an enemy body. When I touched it, my ability told me it carried the scent of a wyvern and had some kind of tracking mark on it. That made me nervous, but it also gave me an idea: taming a dragon. I pocketed the coin and focused on the fight. The battle was over almost before it started. My knights charged from 3 directions, magic blazing on their swords, warhorses trampling everything. The enemy didn't stand a chance. We captured a handful of survivors, including the druid. Barton handled the interrogation his own way, quick and brutal. He snapped a prisoner's neck to make the others talk, and it worked. A young soldier broke down and told us they were looking for directions to an ancient altar hidden in a nearby valley, something that could supposedly weaken Imperial magic knights. Whether that was true or not, it was useful intelligence to bring back. I ordered the prisoners separated and kept under guard. My plan was simple: rejoin the Imperial main army at Steelblade Fortress as fast as possible, hand over the prisoners and the intel, and collect whatever rewards I could. If the Empire and my family didn't want me, well, I could always switch sides. But for now, I just wanted to get out of this blood-soaked ruin and somewhere safe. We left Bloodraven town fast and rode back into the cold rain. The road ahead was nothing but destruction: burned villages, trampled fields, bodies left to rot in the mud. The war had chewed up everything and spit it out. We kept passing refugees along the way. Starving, sick, terrified people dragging themselves through the mud toward the rear provinces. They saw our black armored column and dropped to their knees in the dirt, too scared to even look at us. One old woman was holding a child that looked like it might already be dead. My status ability showed me what I already knew: extreme hunger, cold, disease, fear. No abilities, just suffering. My knights didn't even glance at them. To them, this was normal. But I came from a peaceful world. I'd never seen anything like this. That cocky thought I had earlier about switching sides if things got bad suddenly felt stupid. It didn't matter which side you were on. The war crushed ordinary people all the same. If I wanted to survive here and build something, I'd need more than just clever tricks. Barton told me we were about 4.5 days from Steelblade Fortress. When it got dark, he pointed out an abandoned manor on a hill that still had some intact buildings. I gave the order to camp there. The place was a wreck. The main house burned to a skeleton, outbuildings half collapsed, weeds and rubble everywhere. But it sat on high ground with stone walls that still offered some cover. Barton took charge of setting up camp without me having to say a word. Scouts swept the ruins first. Then knights blocked wall gaps with heavy stones, cleared out shelters, and a few who knew barrier magic set up warning traps around the perimeter. Watching them work, I realized this wasn't just a strong fighting force. They were experienced professionals who knew exactly how to operate in the field. That was reassuring, but it also made me wonder how I was ever going to truly earn their respect. I settled into a stone storage building they'd cleaned out for me. A small fire crackled in the center. My belongings, a fancy leather pack and a heavy metal chest, were brought in. I sat by the fire and pulled out the wyvern-scented gold coin again. In the firelight, the strange symbols on it seemed to shimmer faintly, and the sulfur and beast smell was stronger in the enclosed space. A wyvern, not as powerful as a true dragon, but still a flying predator with serious combat ability. If I could find it, maybe even tame it, that would change everything for me. The Reindort name carried weight when it came to dragon kind. It was in the blood of this body I now wore. But I decided to keep the coin secret for now. I didn't know enough yet, and until I had real authority over these knights, the fewer people who knew about my advantages, the better. Barton brought me hot soup, meat jerky and grain flour boiled together. It tasted awful, salty and gamey, but the warmth sliding down into my stomach was genuinely wonderful. I asked him about our supply situation. He said we had about 10 days of food and horse feed, plenty to reach Steelblade Fortress. But he admitted the men were grumbling. Morale was shaky. They had no future to look forward to, and they knew it. I asked about the prisoners. Barton said they'd been interrogated separately, and their stories matched up. They really were searching for an ancient altar, supposedly left behind by the Elven dynasty 1,000 years ago, connected to some natural force that could affect magical power. But they didn't know the exact location. They needed some kind of special artifact or the right timing to find the entrance. The Elven dynasty had shattered into scattered kingdoms ages ago and been beaten down by humans and demons since. If they'd really had something that powerful, they would have used it to save themselves. It sounded like a fairy tale, but Barton was cautious. He said druids sometimes did receive real visions through nature, so we shouldn't dismiss it entirely. We agreed to keep the prisoners secured and hand everything over when we reached the main army. I asked about the refugees, whether the Empire did anything for them. Barton's answer was bleak. The Empire focused on the front lines. Rear province nobles mostly looked the other way. The lucky refugees might get taken in as peasant laborers. Most would end up selling themselves into slavery for a piece of bread. He said it all with the calm voice of a man who'd seen it too many times to feel anything about it anymore. After Barton left to check the perimeter, I sat alone by the fire and started really thinking about my situation. I went through the original Farnell's memories piece by piece. House Reindort had been the Empire's greatest dragon-taming dynasty. Ancient dragons sleeping in their lairs had been the family's ultimate trump card. But those ancient dragons had fallen into a mysterious deep sleep, and the family's dragon power had been shrinking for generations. Now they were down to a dozen young dragons, some wyverns, and a bunch of mixed-blood dragon beasts. House Stewart, with their griffins and magic, had backed the right prince and risen to the top. House Reindort backed the loser and needed someone to throw under the carriage. That someone was me. A classic scapegoat story. I never got any of the good times, but they sure found me fast when they needed someone to blame. Then a new thought hit me hard. Going to Steelblade Fortress might actually be the worst thing I could do. Once there, my knights would be absorbed into some general's army, probably split up across different units. I'd have zero power or say in anything. The intelligence about the altar? Someone else would take the credit. And House Stewart's people might be there, ready to make my life even worse. The Empire only told me to go govern my territory. Nobody actually ordered me to join the fighting. So why hand myself over to people who wanted me dead or forgotten? A bold plan started forming. Instead of going to the fortress, I'd go straight to my territory, that broken-down borderland they'd given me as a glorified exile. It was a mess, sure. War-torn, dangerous, right next to enemy territory. But it was mine. On paper, at least. I could use it as a base to build real power, away from the Empire's control and my family's schemes. But first, I needed Barton on my side. Really on my side, not just following orders. That night, I put it to him straight. I asked what he thought would happen to us at Steelblade Fortress. He admitted we'd probably be assigned as cannon fodder, especially given my status as a discard. I told him I didn't want to put our fate in someone else's hands. He was shocked when I said I wanted to go directly to the territory instead. He listed every problem. No supplies, no safety, no legal cover, the risk of being branded deserters. I pushed back. I reminded him of what we'd both seen on the road. I asked if the Empire really cared whether we lived or died. I pointed out that at the fortress, the best we could hope for was dying on a battlefield nobody would remember, with someone else taking the glory. I pulled out my official territory grant, stamped with the Imperial seal and family crest. This was our legal cover. We were going to our assigned territory. We just needed to take a flexible route. We could claim we ran into enemy forces and had to change course. And once we established ourselves on that land and showed results, would the Empire really come after a disposable Viscount over a worthless piece of border territory? Barton stared into the fire for a long time. I watched his status screen shift, internal struggle, weighing pros and cons, shock mixed with something that looked like agreement. His loyalty marker was wavering. He finally asked me one question. Did I really believe I could make it work, even in a wasteland surrounded by enemies? I told him the truth. I didn't have a guaranteed plan. But I promised I would fight with everything I had to keep us alive and build something worth having. I told him the Reindort name shouldn't fade away in shame. I said we had 120 of the best magic knights in the Empire, dragon-blood warhorses, and some unexpected opportunities I couldn't reveal yet. I pressed my hand against my chest where the coin sat. After a long silence, Barton dropped to one knee. He slammed his fist against his chest plate and swore an oath. The Ironrock family had served the Reindorts for generations, and he would follow me to the territory, through fire and death, no matter what came. His status screen changed right in front of me. Loyalty surged upward. Determination. A sense of purpose. I pulled him to his feet and gripped his hand. I promised I wouldn't betray his trust or his knight's trust. From that moment on, we were bound together. Now we had real planning to do. A new route that avoided Imperial checkpoints and patrols, a strategy for dealing with any enemy stragglers we might encounter, and somehow, a way to use that gold coin to chase the slim chance of taming a wyvern. After Barton swore his oath, we got straight to planning. He spread out a rough leather map and showed me the situation. Our original route followed the Blackwater River straight to Steelblade Fortress, wide, safe, and crawling with Imperial checkpoints. My territory, Starnight Domain, sat southeast of the fortress, separated by mountain branches and thick forest. To get there without being spotted, we'd have to go the long way around. West first, through a place called Thunder Valley and the Forgotten Hills. Rough terrain, almost no people. Then south along the forest edge, and finally east through the edge of Crowwood Forest to reach Starnight Domain. It would take twice as long, and the land was full of monsters, bandits, and possibly hostile non-human tribes. I asked about supplies. Barton said if we rationed carefully and hunted along the way, we'd make it. But once we arrived at the territory, we'd need to solve the food problem immediately. Starnight Domain was too ruined to provide anything. We worked out cover stories for why we changed course. 3 options we could mix together. We were chased by elite enemy forces, we received urgent reports of attacks on the territory, or we were clearing out enemy activity discovered at Bloodraven Town. The prisoners we'd captured would serve as living proof, and we could fake battle damage if needed. Barton would quietly brief the trustworthy squad leaders overnight. I casually asked Barton about the gold coin from Bloodraven, whether he knew anything about Druna currency or rumors of large flying creatures in the area. He said Druna people rarely used minted coins, preferring barter or magic gem shards. As for wyverns, he mentioned that deep in the Weeping Mountains there were supposed to be wyvern nests, but they were far from us. That detail stuck in my mind, because it lined up with the faint pull I felt from the coin. Not a coincidence. I kept the coin's real nature to myself and sent Barton off to prepare. Alone by the fire, I turned the coin over in my hands. The idea of finding a wyvern on our way to the territory was taking shape. Wyverns were greedy creatures, obsessed with shiny things like gold and gems, fiercely territorial, and usually solitary. From the dragon knowledge buried in this body's bloodline memories, I knew taming one didn't always require brute force. You could appeal to their greed, catch them at a weak moment, or use dragon blood pressure to dominate them. I didn't want to fight one head-on. Even with my knights, we'd win but lose people, and every single one of these elite soldiers was too valuable to waste. I'd need to be smart about it. I made the wyvern hunt a secret secondary goal, If things looked bad, I'd drop it instantly. Getting to the territory safely came first, always. I barely slept that night. By the time the sky started to lighten, the rain had finally eased up. The knights were already moving, packing gear, taking down defenses, saddling horses. But the air felt different. Barton and the squad leaders had been talking to people overnight, and there was a restless energy in the camp, a mix of confusion and curiosity. When the column was formed up in the ruined courtyard, every eye turned to me. I climbed onto a broken wall so everyone could see me, and I gave the speech of my life. I told them the enemy wasn't just looking for some ancient altar at Bloodraven. They'd sent squads to attack our territory, Star Knight Domain. It was half true at best, but it hit hard. These knights knew that the territory wasn't just mine. The surrounding knight fiefs would be distributed to them. That was their future property under threat. I told them the Imperial main army was tied up at Steelblade Fortress and couldn't help. Our homeland, House Riendort's foothold in the east, was in danger. I told them we were Riendort knights, and our swords defended family interests. Our honor could not be stained. Then I announced the decision. We would not go to Steelblade Fortress. We would march east to Star Knight Domain, clear every enemy in our path, and build our own stronghold. The road would be harder and more dangerous, through barren hills and dark forests full of enemies and monsters. But it was also a road full of opportunity. We would be the sword that carved out new glory for House Riendort. I saw fire light up in their eyes. These were warriors who craved honor and purpose, and I was giving them both. Then I shifted tone and got personal. I told them I wouldn't hoard the glory for myself. I would march at the front of the column. I would eat what they ate and sleep where they slept. Their achievements would be remembered, their sacrifices repaid. From today, we weren't just commander and subordinates. We were brothers building a future together. I drew my sword and pointed it at the gray sky. For Riendort. For our future. Forward, Barton roared it back first. Then the whole column erupted, swords raised, voices thundering. My status vision showed doubt and anxiety melting away, replaced by determination, excitement, and sharply rising loyalty across the ranks. I exhaled quietly. Step 1 was done. I tied their goals to mine. We moved out fast, heading southwest into the Forgotten Hills. No main roads, only trails, mountain paths, and raw wilderness. The Dragonblood horses proved their worth on every steep, muddy slope, climbing where normal horses would have slipped and fallen. I rode near the front with Barton, constantly asking him questions about terrain, monsters, and the political landscape between the Empire and Druna. I was filling gaps in my knowledge as fast as I could. At the same time, I kept talking to nearby knights when the chance came up, asking about their hometowns, complimenting their horses. My status ability helped me read the room perfectly, so I could be friendly without losing authority. Slowly, the way they looked at me started changing. Less distance, less mechanical obedience. A hint of real respect creeping in. And all the while, I kept feeling the coin against my chest. The further southwest we traveled, the stronger its faint pulse became, like an invisible thread pulling me deeper into the Forgotten Hills, toward the jagged mountains, right where Barton had said wyverns were rumored to nest. We pushed deeper into the southwestern wilderness, and the landscape changed completely. The war scars disappeared, swallowed up by something older and wilder. Burned villages gave way to twisted dead trees, jagged rocks, and thick patches of dark scrub. The air stopped smelling like blood and ash, and started smelling like wet rot, mossy stone, and bitter weeds. The only living things we saw were scrawny foxes and jumpy rabbits darting between the rocks. The trail, if you could even call it that, turned into rain-carved gullies, slippery stone slopes, and tangles of thorny dead vines. This is where the Dragonblood horses really proved their worth. Under their scaled legs, they didn't have hooves. They had curved claws, like forest-dwelling land dragons. Those claws dug into cracks and mud, keeping them steady on slopes that would have broken a normal horse's legs. And they moved almost silently, just a faint scraping sound. My strange ability kicked in when I focused hard on an area, giving me little readouts about the environment, barren hills, primitive, possible trouble from monsters, bandits, or non-human tribes, slim hunting, and herb-gathering opportunities, not exactly encouraging. The knights were tense, but holding together. I caught bits of their chatter. A rough-voiced one named Orson was cursing the thorns stuck to his leg armor. A young knight, Carl, I think, said he'd rather deal with rocks than listen to Stewart family Griffin riders showing off at Steelblade Fortress. An older scarred veteran everyone called Old Hammer warned the kid not to get comfortable, because things far worse than rabbits hid behind these rocks. Then something happened that made my stomach drop. We heard heavy wing beats overhead. Everyone looked up. 3 golden-feathered griffins swept across the gray sky, each carrying a knight in gleaming silver armor with fancy feathered crests. Stewart family griffin riders. On the other side of the sky, snow-white Pegasus riders glided past too, probably Imperial Royal Air Forces. My heart jumped into my throat. I felt every knight around me go rigid, hands silently tightening on weapons. Barton flashed a concealment signal instantly. The whole column slowed down and pressed into whatever cover the terrain offered, rock outcrops, scraggly trees. The dragon blood horses sensed our fear and went completely still, only the faint sulfur mist from their nostrils giving them away. For one terrible moment, I thought a griffin rider's gaze lingered right on our position. My mind raced. Fight? Run? Reveal ourselves? Every option looked bad, but the look passed. To those high-flying knights, we were nothing. Just another insignificant little ground unit trudging through the wasteland, maybe some lost nobleman's private soldiers. In a war zone this big, groups like ours were everywhere and worth nothing. They flew on toward the southeast, toward Steelblade Fortress, and vanished into the clouds. Nobody breathed properly until the sky was completely clear. I wiped cold sweat off my forehead and exchanged a look with Barton. We both felt the same thing, relief mixed with a bitter sting. Our safety depended on being too small to notice. That feeling was humiliating. Everyone good? Keep moving, Barton called out, voice low but firm. The column started again, but the mood was heavier. We all understood now. We weren't just dodging enemies ahead. We had to hide from our own side too. I touched the coin in my chest pocket. It pulsed faintly, like it was urging me on. I looked toward the cloud-wrapped mountain shadows to the southwest, where the wyverns supposedly nested. I needed my own power, on the ground and in the air. I couldn't keep being invisible, surviving only because nobody bothered to look down. The knight's banter picked back up a little, which was a good sign. Carl asked Barton if they were officially going solo, and Barton snapped back that they were heading to Star Knight Domain on official orders, just taking a longer route and clearing enemies along the way. Old Hammer warned Carl he'd change his tune when the food ran low or something crept into camp at night. Orson boasted about his hunting skills, and someone else reminded him he'd nearly shot Barton's horse thinking it was a deer last time. The laughter that followed was quiet, but it loosened the tension a bit. I rode up front next to Barton and asked how long until we cleared the hills. 2 more days to reach Thunder Valley's entrance, he said, if nothing went wrong. But the valley itself was supposed to be worse, constant thunderstorms and even rougher terrain. I noticed his lips were cracked and dry, so I offered him my water flask. He hesitated. It was fancier than his, but he took a small sip. A tiny thing, but it felt like it mattered. He asked me quietly if I really believed we could hold Star Knight Domain. I was silent for a moment, then told him yes. He asked why. I said because we had no other choice. And because I had him, and 100+ fearless brothers, and our official commission, and maybe just enough luck to turn things around. I could see some of his doubt fading as he looked at me. Right then, a scout came galloping back from the front, face grim. Captain, my lord, we found something up ahead, signs of a battle, about 3 miles out. It doesn't look good. The scout's report caught me off guard, battle signs ahead, but not from Drunna soldiers. Wolf beast folk. 2 different tribes had clashed hard, leaving dozens of bodies behind. One tribe of about 200 or 300 was fleeing, and another of around 500 was chasing them down. My knights weren't impressed. Barton called them creatures who haven't shed their ears and tails yet. Old Hammer said they were barely a step above beastmen, those fully wild, barely intelligent animal people who couldn't even use tools. Orson was just excited to stretch his arms. The general attitude was clear. In this world, beast folk sat in an awkward spot between humans and animals. They'd picked up some iron weapons and basic tactics from watching humans, but in everyone's eyes, that just made them livestock that could talk. My status ability gave me more detail. The pursuing tribe, Warskar, had basic pack hunting coordination, sharp wolf senses, and tough bodies. Threat level, low against a proper army, but their numbers could cause trouble. The fleeing tribe, Split Claw, was even less of a threat, broken and running. Barton suggested we go around them. No point fighting beast folk, he said. Dirty work with no reward. But I disagreed. I saw opportunity in 3 directions at once. First, my knights needed to keep winning battles to stay sharp and build unity. Second, I needed to see their full combat capability with my own eyes. Third, those beast folk knew the local area, water sources, dangerous zones, and most importantly, what lived in the jagged mountains to the southwest. I ordered the attack on the pursuing Warscar tribe. 500 beast folk against 120 elite magic knights. I told Barton to finish it fast, ignore the fleeing tribe, and capture a few of the smarter-looking ones alive. Barton set up a simple but devastating plan. 2 elite squads looped around through the hills to cut off the enemy's rear and cause chaos. The main force took a favorable slow position, ready to charge once the beast folk were driven toward us. I watched from a hilltop with my guards as the trap sprang. The flanking squads hit first. Enchanted arrows and area effect spells rained down on the back half of the Warscar column. Fireballs exploded in the dry brush, setting fur and scrub ablaze. Ice spears pinned down anyone trying to organize a counterattack. Then the knights swept in from the sides with blazing swords. When Barton saw the enemy formation shatter completely, he gave the charge order. The main force poured downhill like a black flood. The lead riders unleashed shockwave charges that sent beastfolk flying. Shields, weapons, bodies, all of it. Windblade techniques sliced through armor and weapons. Elemental knights detonated fire and ice in the densest clusters. The Dragonblood horses were terrifying up close, their claws ripping through defenses, their short-range flame breath clearing pockets of resistance in an instant. It was total slaughter. The beastfolk's iron weapons couldn't even scratch enchanted armor. Every swing of a knight's sword, every spell, took lives effortlessly. The knights worked in groups of 5 and 10, covering each other, rotating attacks and defense like a machine built for killing. They weren't cruel about it. They were professional, almost bored, treating it like routine work. Some beastfolk threw down their weapons and begged for mercy in broken common tongue, tails jammed between their legs. The knights cut most of them down without hesitation. Accepting surrender from beastfolk wasn't something they considered worth doing. I shouted across the battlefield using a simple wind amplification spell, pointing out specific captives I wanted kept alive, ones who looked like leaders or seemed sharper than average. The knights adjusted, and soon 7 or 8 Warscar beastfolk were dragged from the pile of dead and held under guard, shaking and whimpering with their ears flat. Meanwhile, the fleeing Split Claw tribe disappeared into the hills without looking back. They didn't see us as saviors. To them, humans were worse than rival tribes. Falling into human hands meant slavery or death. The battle was over in minutes. Nearly 400 beastfolk lay dead. The knights swept the field, ignoring the crude weapons, keeping only the occasional interesting wolf fang or enchanted hide. They stacked the bodies like garbage, without a shred of respect. I went down to question the prisoners. When they saw the dragon emblem on my armor and realized I was the leader, they shook even harder. I asked why the 2 tribes were fighting. A scarred one with a metal collar, some kind of chief, stammered out that they were fighting over Howling Wind Canyon, which had a reliable water source and iron ore deposits. Resources. Survival. Their wars were more advanced than pure beastmen who fought over food and mating, but not by much. Then I steered the conversation where I really wanted it. I asked about dangers in the area, especially toward the southwest, the jagged mountains. Their eyes went wide with genuine terror. They called it Forbidden Land. Something lived there that they called the Flame Lord of the Sky. Its nest sat on the highest peak. It breathed destroying fire. Its shadow could cover an entire valley. Their bravest warriors had gone in to gather herbs and never came back. Nobody dared go near its territory. My heart hammered. A fire-breathing flying creature on the highest peak of the jagged mountains, exactly where the coin had been pulling me. I pressed for more details, but they didn't have much. They'd only seen it circling far overhead, heard roars like thunder, felt its crushing presence from a distance. Everything else was just tribal horror stories about intruders burned to ash. After I finished questioning them, I waved my hand and Barton had the knights strip them of anything weapon-like and chase them off. Killing helpless prisoners who'd already broken would have been pointless, even shameful, in a way. Letting them go carrying their terror of House Riendort's power might actually be useful. They'd spread the word. Old Hammer spat after them and called them lucky that I was merciful. Orson joked about their toughness compared to pure beastmen. Young Carl was pale but steadier than before, quietly telling his friend Rick that, "We're really strong." Rick told him to remember this feeling. Be ruthless to enemies. Be steady with yourself. I stayed quiet, watching the blood-soaked ground. These beast folk were treated as barely people by everyone around me, but I was already thinking differently. Any group on this land, no matter how despised, could become a problem or a tool. Today's fight had done everything I needed, tested my force, gathered intelligence, and shown me how much fear the Riendort Dragon Crest could inspire. Casualty report came in, 0 dead, 0 wounded. 120 magic knights, all untouched. My most valuable asset, perfectly intact. We moved out again, heading southwest. The coin in my pocket felt slightly warmer now, like it knew we were getting closer. I stared at the jagged mountain silhouette cutting through the clouds ahead. The flame lord of the sky. I was coming for it. We left the bloody battlefield behind and kept pushing through the hills. The knights were in better spirits. I could hear them joking about the fight, arguing over who swung harder and who missed. I let them talk. Veterans need to blow off steam, and as long as discipline held, a little rough humor was fine. Barton rode up and warned me that the terrain ahead would get worse. Deep gullies, easy to get lost in. And if the Flame Lord of the Sky really lived in the jagged mountains, stumbling toward it blind was asking for trouble. I agreed. The gold coin's pull was getting stronger, but it only told me direction, not what lay between us and the destination. We need a local guide, I said. Barton frowned. Out here, the only locals were beast folk or pure beastmen, and neither was trustworthy in his eyes. Then, as if the world heard me, a forward patrol signaled they'd found something. They came back with a struggling white figure slung across a horse, a lone wolf beast folk girl they'd found hiding behind rocks in a dry riverbed. She was young, probably just reached adulthood. What struck me immediately was her fur, pure snow white, completely different from the gray and brown of the tribes we'd just fought. Silver gray only at the tips of her ears and tail. She had sharp ice blue eyes full of fear and defiance, and she was kicking and clawing at the knight holding her, getting absolutely nowhere. My status ability told me a lot. White wolf beast folk, unknown tribe. Terrified and angry, lightly injured. Her skills were impressive for a beast folk. Exceptional senses in sight, smell, and hearing, expert-level wilderness survival, and solid stealth ability. Threat level, basically, 0. And a note that caught my attention. Her rare coloring might have caused her to be seen as bad luck and rejected by her tribe. Old Hammer suggested selling her to some noble with special tastes. A few knights laughed. The girl's eyes flashed with humiliation, and she fought harder. "Shut up," I said. Quiet voice, but they all went silent instantly. I rode closer and looked at her. Something about those fierce blue eyes reminded me of the cat I'd had back in my old life. The same stubborn, unbroken look. It was a strange feeling, but I pushed it aside. I asked her name. She glared and said nothing. The knight shook her roughly. I waved him off and asked again calmly. Finally, she spat out a single word, White Claw. I asked which tribe she belonged to and why she was alone. She clamped her mouth shut. Barton leaned over and suggested we just get rid of her. A lone beast folk girl was worthless baggage. But I was already thinking differently. My status screen said she had expert wilderness survival skills and exceptional senses. She knew this land. That made her exactly what we needed. I told her we were heading toward the jagged mountains and needed a guide. The reaction was instant. Her eyes went huge with shock and terror. She blurted out that the jagged mountains were the territory of something she called the Wingburner. Nobody could get close. We were going to die? Wingburner. Another name for the same creature the wolf warriors had called the Flame Lord of the Sky. A wyvern. And White Claw clearly knew about it, which meant she knew the surrounding area too. I offered her a deal. Guide us safely to within sight of the wyvern's nesting peak, no deeper. In return, I'd guarantee her safety, give her food and a good Imperial-made dagger, and set her free when we were done. She wavered. Freedom, a weapon, and food were life-changing for a cast-out with nothing. But her fear of the mountains was real. "You'll all burn to ash," she whispered. "That's our problem," I said. "You just need to show us the way." Then I glanced at the knights around us, letting the unspoken alternative sink in. Alone, captured by humans, no tribe to go back to. Her options without my offer were grim. She finally gave in, voice barely audible. She'd take us to where we could see the nesting peak. Not one step further, even if we killed her. I agreed. Seeing the nest and understanding the situation was enough for now. I had her set down from the horse, but kept 2 guards on her. I ordered someone to give her water and food. A knight tossed her a water flask and hard bread, and she devoured it, clearly starving. The knights reacted the way I expected. Orson watched her eat with amusement. Old Hammer warned everyone not to let their guard down around beast folk, said they were all scheming. Young Carl thought she didn't seem so bad. His buddy Rick told him to cut the sympathy. Beast folk could never be trusted, and the Lord was just using her temporarily. I heard all of it and wasn't surprised. Deep prejudice doesn't vanish overnight. I just needed White Claw to do her job while staying under control. Once she'd eaten a little, we moved out with her walking in the middle of the column, watched from both sides. She was wound tight, ears swiveling constantly, body tense, clearly not used to being surrounded by armored humans. Barton asked her which way. She studied the terrain, then pointed toward a hidden, rough-looking side trail. She said the easier path ahead had underground hollow spots carved by a hidden river that would collapse under heavy traffic. Plus, it crossed the feeding grounds of a herd of spike-backed boars that were extremely aggressive. Right on cue, we heard deep animal roars coming from exactly that direction. The knight who'd been complaining about the hard path shut his mouth. From that point, White Claw proved her value over and over. She pointed out safe routes through terrain that looked impassable. She identified edible roots and berries. The knights weren't interested, but it was good to know. She warned us away from poisonous plants. She even read the wind and air to predict a sudden mountain rainstorm, giving us time to find a cave before it hit. Some knights started looking at her with less contempt and more grudging respect. Old Hammer and his crowd stayed suspicious, calling it all a trick to win our trust. I just watched and noted everything. Her survival instincts were sharp, and she had a habit of automatically steering us away from spots with bad sight lines or potential ambush points. The kind of reflex you only develop from years of living in dangerous territory. During a rest stop, I had the guards give her dried meat. She ate it slowly this time, not desperately, and I caught her ice blue eyes studying me when she thought I wasn't looking. She was reassessing me. She finally asked the question that had been eating at her. Why were we going after the wing burner? She said its fire could melt rock, its roar could crack mountains, and even her tribe's strongest warriors couldn't get anywhere near its nest. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked about her tribe. Her ears drooped and her eyes went dark. Snowclaw tribe, she said quietly. Gone. Other tribes had joined forces and attacked them. She was the only one who got away, just as I'd guessed from the status notes. Tribe destroyed, alone, nowhere to go. That explained why freedom and a dagger meant everything to her. I said I was sorry, briefly, and didn't push further. Beast folk tribal wars weren't my concern. We kept moving with White Claw guiding us, and she steered us around several more trouble spots. The landscape grew wilder and more barren the deeper we went. The sulfur smell in the air grew faintly stronger, and the gold coin against my chest pulsed harder and clearer with every mile, like a second heartbeat outside my body. We made camp that evening in a sheltered mountain hollow. White Claw was allowed to move around the camp area, but stayed under close watch. She sat on a rock away from the fires, hugging her knees, watching the knights work with their efficient routines and gleaming equipment. Her expression was complicated: fear, curiosity, and maybe a trace of envy. I sat by my fire, thinking about the next step. White Claw had already proven useful. With her guidance, we'd saved time and avoided real dangers. But the real challenge was still ahead. The wingburner, the flame lord of the sky. Whatever it was called, it was a fire-breathing wyvern nesting on the highest peak of the jagged mountains, and I was deliberately walking toward it with a gold coin that practically vibrated in my pocket. I needed a plan, a way to approach this creature, study it, and maybe make contact, without getting my people killed. Brute force was an option, but a bad one. Even if we won, I'd lose nights I couldn't replace. Night fell cold and silent over the hills. White Claw curled up in her corner, her white fur glowing faintly in the moonlight like a soft ball of snow. I looked at her and thought of my cat again. That strange feeling of familiarity. Maybe I could keep her around. She was useful, and honestly, in this harsh world, having someone nearby who reminded me of something gentle from my old life wasn't the worst thing. Next morning the rain finally stopped, though the sky stayed gray and cold. We made camp on a gravel flat and cooked up a thick porridge from dried meat, crumbled hard bread, and some roots that White Claw had confirmed were safe to eat. It looked and tasted terrible, but it filled the stomach. While the knights ate and maintained their gear, I noticed White Claw sitting alone, nibbling her food, still watchful but not as tense as before. She kept stealing glances at me with those complicated ice blue eyes. Something made me get up and walk over to her. I sat down on a rock nearby and offered her my water flask. The knights all noticed. A lord approaching a beast folk captive wasn't normal behavior. White Claw flinched and pulled back, but when I told her to relax and just drink, she accepted it quietly. I looked out at the misty mountains in the distance, the jagged mountains, our destination, and started talking. Not strategic talk, personal talk. I told her that not long ago, I'd been living a completely different life in a completely different place. No swords, no wilderness, just tedious routine things I couldn't really explain to her. Then everything changed. I lost a lot and got thrown into this strange land against my will. In a way, I said, we're in the same boat. She jerked her head up, stunned. A human lord comparing himself to a beast folk girl? Unthinkable. But she could hear it wasn't fake. I meant it. She asked, almost in a whisper, if someone like me could really lose things too. I laughed bitterly and told her yes. Family, status, trust, even a companion who'd been by my side, taken away. Sometimes you do nothing wrong, and you still end up being the piece that gets sacrificed. A piece, she repeated softly, and I saw real recognition in her eyes. Her Snowclaw tribe had been destroyed for the same reason. They were small enough to be thrown away in some bigger tribe's game. I told her that's exactly why we had to grab any chance to get stronger, strong enough that nobody could ever push us around again. That's why I was going after the wing burner. I wanted its power. She panicked at that. It's a dragon. Nobody can tame it. It'll burn you all. I shook my head and explained that for House Riendort, the relationship with dragons wasn't about taming by force. It was about communication, connection, finding a way to coexist and cooperate. That was the Riendort bloodline's gift. When she heard the name Riendort, her eyes went wide. Even out here in the wilderness, beast folk knew the legend, the family that could speak with dragons. You're a dragon tamer? She nearly shouted. Nearby knights puffed up with pride hearing it. Old Hammer looked satisfied. Orson straightened his back. The Riendort name still carried weight, and moments like this were exactly when to use it. I confirmed it without elaborating. I told her she didn't need to be so afraid. We weren't charging blindly to our deaths. She stared at me like I was a figure from myth, her whole attitude shifting from guarded fear to something closer to awe. She still tried to warn me that the wing burner was violent and cruel, but her voice had no conviction left. I stood up, brushed off the dust, and told her to get ready. Today we'd push as close to the jagged mountain's outer edge as possible. Then a lookout's warning signal cut through the camp. Enemy spotted, northeast, about 2 miles out. A Beastman tribe camp, roughly 100 strong, and they'd seen us. Every night dropped their food and was armed and mounted within seconds, silent and deadly efficient. Barton was at my side instantly. I didn't want distractions from our real goal, but they'd already spotted us, and at this distance there was no avoiding it. The scouts identified them as hyena men, a bloodhowl tribe. Hyena men were worse than wolf beast folk. They were true beast men, bigger, uglier, more savage, living purely by raiding and killing. They were the nightmare of every traveler and small settlement in the wilds. White Claw went chalk white when she heard the name. She pressed closer to me involuntarily and stammered that Bloodhowl had been terrorizing her people. She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. These creatures were probably part of the reason her tribe was gone. Cold fury flickered through me. 100 hyena men against my knights? This wouldn't even be a real fight. And wiping out raiders like these served multiple purposes: combat practice, morale boost, and maybe earning a sliver of goodwill from White Claw and anyone else these monsters had been terrorizing. "Barton," I said, voice hard. "Crush them. Leave none alive." He grinned like a wolf himself. Killing vermin like this came with zero hesitation. No fancy tactics this time. 20 knights rode out in a straight charge, a black storm of death slamming into the hyena men's half-assembled camp. The wooden stockade shattered on impact. Magic sword techniques blazed brighter and more vicious than they had against the wolf beast folk. It felt like the knights were pouring out every frustration from days of hard marching into this one assault. Fire turned hyena men into running torches. Ice froze them into grotesque statues. Wind blades tore them apart. Lances and enchanted swords split bodies clean in half, armor and weapons included. The dragon blood horses trampled and clawed through everything in their path. It wasn't a battle. It was extermination. This time I didn't stay on a hill watching. I rode in with the guards, right into the camp. A hyena man came howling at me, and Barton cut it down with a casual backhand swing, spraying blood across the dirt. The stench was overwhelming. Hot iron blood mixed with the hyena men's own rank animal smell. I watched my knights methodically clear every moving target, whether it fought back or begged for mercy. My heart pounded, and not just from the violence. There was something else this time, a feeling of control. Control over this force, over life and death. It was dangerous and seductive, and I knew I needed to be careful with it. White Claw followed behind with a guard, watching everything. She was trembling badly, eyes wide with horror. These blood-howl hyena men, the same monsters that had haunted her tribe, were being mowed down like grass. She was seeing firsthand what this army could do, and it was burning itself into her soul. It was over fast. The entire camp destroyed, every hyena man dead, smoke rising from the wreckage. Barton reported, "Cleanup complete, 0 casualties on our side." Again, I rode over to White Claw, who looked like she might collapse. I looked down at her from my horse. "See that?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's what power looks like. Without it, you end up like them. Or like your tribe. At someone else's mercy." She stared up at me, at the cold armor, at the blood-soaked knights behind me, and nodded hard, lips moving but no words coming out. The lesson was carved deep. The gold coin against my chest felt almost burning hot now. "Take us to the wing burner," I told her. We left the destroyed camp behind like a footnote and kept moving toward the jagged mountain silhouette ahead. White Claw walked with us, but the way she looked at me had changed again. Fear was still there, but layered over it now was something deeper, a kind of awe you feel when you've stared into something vast and terrifying and realized it might be on your side. We left the destroyed hyena men camp behind and pushed deeper toward the jagged mountains. The knights rode in silence, faces blank, treating the massacre like checking off a routine task. The blood smell still clung to our armor, but a new smell was creeping in, sulfur, getting stronger with every mile southwest. The gold coin against my chest had changed. It wasn't just pulsing faintly anymore. It burned with steady heat, like a living thing with its own heartbeat, pulling me toward those jagged peaks that cut the horizon like a row of broken teeth. Barton noticed the sulfur too. He rode up and said it usually meant a powerful fire creature nesting nearby. I agreed. White Claw had told us the wing burner lived on the highest peak, and this stink was probably from its activity. I slowed down to talk to White Claw. She was riding a spare dragon blood horse now, gripping the reins so hard her knuckles were white, still shaken from watching the hyena men get wiped out. I asked how much farther. She steadied herself, sniffed the air, read the terrain, and pointed toward a V-shaped gap in the mountain range, a place she called Dragon Breath Pass. 3 days at our current pace, she said. From there we'd be able to see the main peak, the wingburner's nest. But that's also where danger truly began, because the creature's patrol range reached the pass. I told her we'd set up our final observation camp right there. As we rode side by side, I could tell she was still processing everything she'd witnessed. I asked if she thought we were cruel for what we did to the hyena men. She shook her head fast. They were bloodhowl raiders, killers who'd attacked her people. But she couldn't find words for what bothered her. I finished her thought. Too efficient, too cold. I explained it plainly. Mercy toward enemies was cruelty toward yourself and your people. Those hyena men, left alive, would have raided weaker tribes tomorrow or stabbed us in the back while we dealt with the wyvern. Eliminating them wasn't about bloodlust. It was about removing threats so we could survive. I put it in terms she'd understand. When she hunted a dangerous animal, would she hesitate out of pity and give it a chance to bite back? She said no. That would get you killed. Exactly, I told her. Same principle, bigger scale, better tools. Survival rules were simple and cruel everywhere. Then she asked the question I expected. Was the wing burner just another dangerous prey to be eliminated? No, I said. The wyvern was different. It was a higher being, a living embodiment of power. You couldn't apply simple hunter and prey rules to it. House Riendort's way was to build a more complex, more equal relationship with dragons. That took wisdom, courage, and luck. I touched the burning coin on my chest. We weren't going there to kill. We were going to make contact. That shook her deeply. Not killing, but contacting something she considered an unstoppable force of destruction. I could see her understanding of what, dragon tamer, meant expanding. It wasn't just about strength, but about ambition and vision beyond what ordinary people could imagine. The landscape kept changing as we got closer to the mountains. The rocks turned an unhealthy dark red. Plants grew twisted and sparse, with scorched edges on their leaves. The sulfur got thick enough to sting the throat. Even the dragon blood horses grew restless, snorting more sulfur-tinged breath that mixed with the environmental stink. My status ability flagged the environment. High sulfur concentration, active fire elements, potential dragon aura effects, long-term breathing hazards, risk of attracting fire creatures. The dragon's presence could cause unease in both mounts and riders. I ordered everyone to cover their faces, breathe shallow, and report any discomfort immediately. Knights pulled down visors or wrapped cloth over their noses. The horses stayed manageable under skilled handling, but I could feel their nervous energy. We passed strange creatures adapted to this volcanic environment, red-skinned lizards that spat tiny flames, glowing moths dancing through sulfur haze, and a cluster of goat-sized animals with burning crystal growths on their backs that White Claw called lava sheep. Everything gave our column a wide berth. White Claw earned more grudging respect by steering us away from ground that looked solid but hid lava tubes underneath, and warning us off brightly colored mushrooms that released paralytic gas. Some knights stopped looking at her with pure contempt. She was still beast folk in their eyes, still lesser, but a useful tool that kept them alive was easier to tolerate than a useless prisoner. We made camp that evening against a massive rock wall, on hard black basalt where nothing grew but the air was slightly cleaner. Traps set, sentries posted on the high rocks, fires lit to push back the cold and the oppressive weight that hung in the atmosphere. A faint but constant pressure that even hardened veterans could feel. It was the dragon's aura, leaking across miles of mountain stone, making everything feel heavier and darker. The knights ate in silence, more subdued than I'd ever seen them. These were men who'd charged through battlefields without flinching, but the ancient predatory pressure in the air touched something primal in them. I sat outside my tent, chewing food mechanically, eyes locked on the main peak rising like a monstrous silhouette against the night sky. The coin was almost too hot to bear against my skin now, its pulse matching some deep rhythm from inside the mountain, as if it were calling out to something and getting an answer. White Claw huddled in her corner, eating tiny bites, her blue eyes wide and fearful in the firelight. She felt it too, that soul-deep trembling from the peak's direction. In 3 days we'd reach Dragon Breath Pass and face the Wingburner's territory for real. Then it came. A low, vast sound rolled out from the mountains. Not loud, more like a hum from deep underground, but it had a penetrating quality that made every heart in camp skip a beat involuntarily, sinking to its rhythm for one terrible moment. The camp went dead silent. Every knight froze, weapons in hand, staring toward the mountains. The dragon blood horses stamped their claws and whined with fear. White Claws first stood straight up, tail jammed between her legs, teeth chattering. It's the Wingburner, she whispered. It's awake, or patrolling its territory. The coin blazed against my chest, pulsing harder than ever, resonating with whatever had made that sound deep in the mountains. I breathed in the thick sulfur air and felt no fear. Only fire, inside me, matching the fire ahead. It was there, waiting. Wingburner, we're coming. 2 more days of marching through that sulfur-soaked hellscape, and we were running low on everything. The dried meat and hard bread were almost gone. The air burned our throats. The horses needed constant magical soothing to keep them from panicking. The coin on my chest was scorching hot now, pulling me toward the main peak like a compass needle. Then the scouts brought exactly the news I needed, not about the wyvern, but about supplies. 5 miles southeast, a mid-sized beast folk settlement. About 1,000 lizard beast folk, the kind known for brute strength and riding large mountain lizards. They'd claimed a valley with a stable water source and heat-resistant crops. Their stores looked decent. Barton's eyes lit up with calculation. He said these lizard beast folk were aggressive and territorial, but tactically simple. We could take them easily, and their food and livestock would solve our supply problem completely. I didn't hesitate. We needed those supplies to reach the wyvern and eventually survive in our territory. A beast folk tribe sitting on resources we desperately needed, their fate was already decided. Not about good or evil, just survival math. I told Barton to plan it. He suggested a night raid. Use darkness and the horses' stealth to hit their core camp hard. Destroy command and resistance first, finish fast. I agreed and added one condition: preserve the food and livestock. Anyone who resisted could be killed without mercy. We turned southeast like predators stalking in the dark. I brought White Claw along. Her sharp senses worked well at night. When she heard the target was a lizard beast folk tribe, something complicated flickered in her eyes. Disgust, and maybe a hint of anticipation. I noticed but didn't ask. Night fell thick and black. Only a faint red glow on the main peak hinted at the wing burner sleeping above. We crept to the ridge above the valley and looked down at the scattered stone huts, campfires, and the rumble of large lizards in their pens. My status screen told me what I needed to know. The Split Rock tribe was relaxed, unaware, with strong bodies and rockskin abilities, but limited threat against magic knights. Their tamed mountain lizards were big, but no match for our horses. I gave the word. The knights poured down the slope like black ghosts. Silencing runes muffled everything until blades were already cutting throats at the outer posts. Then magic exploded across the valley, fireballs turning warriors to charcoal around their campfires, frost novas freezing defenders solid in narrow passages, wind blades shredding buildings and bodies. 3-man kill teams leapfrogged through the settlement, covering each other, leaving nothing standing behind them. The lizard beast folk fought back hard. They hurled massive rocks and javelins. Their strongest warriors activated rockskin, turning their bodies stone hard. But enchanted weapons cracked that armor like eggshell. Their war lizards charged and got driven back by the horses' claws and flame breath, then trampled their own riders in the chaos. The whole valley became a storm of screaming, crashing buildings, and magical detonations. I directed from behind my guards, calmly adjusting squad positions to cut off any organized resistance. During the fighting, I spotted White Claw. She wasn't fighting. She was threading through gaps in the broken defenses like a white shadow, nose working furiously, leading a squad toward what looked like slave cages deep in the settlement. I sent a guard to follow and watch. The battle lasted less than an hour. Most warriors were dead. The survivors, old ones, women, children, cowered in the rubble, too terrified to even cry. Then something unexpected happened at White Claw's end. She'd broken open wooden cages holding dozens of starving beast folk slaves, captives from various tribes. Among them was a gray-furred wolf beast folk girl who screamed White Claw's name in disbelief. "Gray Leaf, you're alive." White Claw threw herself at the girl, sobbing. They were friends from Snowclaw tribe. They'd both escaped the destruction but got separated, and Gray Leaf had been captured by the lizard tribe's hunters. This raid had accidentally reunited them. My guard reported back. I looked at the two wolf girls clinging to each other, shaking, and at the terrified slave beast folk huddled around them. I waved my hand. "Let the slaves go. I have no interest in killing things that can't fight back." White Claw looked toward me from across the valley with pure gratitude in her eyes. She knew I'd seen everything. Barton's battle report was excellent. All resistance eliminated. Enough captured food to last us 2 months. Dozens of hardy mountain lizards we could slaughter for fresh meat or use as pack animals. And then the real prize. In the tribal chief's stone house, they'd found a heavy leather bag stuffed with hundreds of magic cores. Low and mid-grade crystals harvested from magical beasts the tribe had hunted. For them, These were just treasure and decoration. For us, they were exactly what magic knights and dragon blood horses needed. Concentrated energy that could restore spent magical power and even slightly boost strength. I actually smiled. These cores couldn't have come at a better time. Whether for the wyvern encounter ahead or building the territory later, this was invaluable. I ordered everything packed up and loaded onto the captured lizard pack animals. Barton would personally manage the magic cores and distribute them as needed. The knights worked through what was left of the night, hauling grain sacks, salted meat, and those precious crystals out of the ruined settlement. Before we left, White Claw came to me with Gray Leaf hidden behind her. She gathered her courage and asked if the freed slaves could leave. I said yes. I'd already told her I didn't kill broken, harmless creatures. I acknowledged that she'd actually helped us by sniffing out the storage areas, which saved time. She looked surprised that her private mission to find her friend had earned her credit instead of punishment. I rode away without waiting for thanks. Keeping those slaves alive cost me nothing and bought me more of White Claw's loyalty. What happened to them after they left wasn't my problem. By dawn, we were loaded up and moving again toward Dragon Breath Pass. The ruined valley and its confused, shell-shocked survivors disappeared behind us. White Claw rode alongside her friend Gray Leaf, who was still trembling on a spare horse. White Claw kept looking back at the valley, then forward at my back, her expression a tangle of emotions I could read even without my status screen: fear, awe, gratitude, and something new, a faint sense of belonging, born from the fact that I'd let her save someone she loved. I'd absorbed one of the mid-grade fire magic cores myself, and I could feel the warmth of new magical energy filling my body. Supplies secured. Obstacles cleared. Magic reserves topped off. Ahead, the Dragon Breath Pass loomed closer than ever. Time to face the Wingburner. We reached Dragon Breath Pass on the second morning, and nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Two walls of dark red rock rose hundreds of meters high on either side, sliced clean like a god had taken an axe to the mountain. Between them, a narrow passage wound upward into thick sulfur haze. Beyond the pass, the main peak loomed with a dull red glow pulsing at its summit, like something enormous was breathing in its sleep. But the worst part wasn't what I could see. It was what I could feel. Dragon aura, a crushing, invisible pressure bearing down from every direction, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Even my battle-hardened knights went tense and pale. The dragon blood horses dug their claws into the rock and whined, fighting every instinct that screamed at them to run from a superior predator. White Claw and Gray Leaf were practically collapsing, holding each other up. White Claw stayed as close to me as she dared, as if being near the dragon tamer offered some imaginary protection. I ordered camp set up right there and made one thing absolutely clear: nobody enters the pass, nobody attacks anything, without my direct order. My status screen was screaming warnings: extreme fire element concentration, overwhelming dragon aura, sustained exposure would cause element erosion and spiritual damage. The gold coin was so hot it nearly burned my skin, pulsing in rhythm with something deep inside the mountain. After Barton secured the defenses, he asked me what the plan was. I pulled out the scorching coin and told him we weren't here to kill a dragon. I was going to call it. His face went white, but I cut off his protests. There was no better option. I ordered him to hold position no matter what happened inside the pass. No one follows me in. Then I walked into Dragon Breath Pass alone. The pressure multiplied with every step. The air felt thick as lava. I forced myself forward until I reached a clearing with a full view of a massive lake of molten rock. I stopped there, steadied my mind, and dug into the re-endured bloodline memories for what I needed: the dragon calling song. It wasn't words exactly. It was a strange chant that mimicked dragon mental wavelengths, woven with the ancient rhythms of dragon speech. I opened my mouth and let the song flow out, low, long, with an eerie vibration that carried through the wind and the roar of molten stone. I threaded the coin's energy into it, sending the Wingburner's own signature back toward her. Minutes crawled by, my strength drained. Just when I thought I had nothing left, a sound hit me. Not loud, but so deep it bypassed my ears and shook my soul directly. The entire pass trembled. The lava lake began churning violently, and a shadow the size of a mountain started rising from beneath the surface. Behind me, I heard Barton roar for battle stations. Every night lit up their weapons. White Claw collapsed to the ground. The lake exploded open. First came 4 crown-like horns, punching through the molten surface. Then a head, black-scaled, threaded with glowing red lines, so enormous that a single eye was bigger than my entire body. Golden slit pupils like molten suns locked onto me instantly, cold and absolute. Then the neck, the spine ridged with blade-like spikes, and a tail like a siege engine. She rose fully from the lava and spread her wings. 348 meters of wingspan, 160 meters long. When those wings opened, the shadow swallowed the entire pass, and the camp behind me like night had fallen in an instant. My status ability went haywire. She was classified as a mutated wyvern with red dragon bloodline, massively overgrown through some unknown environmental factor. Her power sat between the strongest wyverns and young true dragons. Threat level, catastrophic. Army destroying. She could use dragon tongue magic. She had progressive dragon breath. Her physical attacks alone could level fortifications. Then her voice slammed into my mind. Not sound, pure mental force. Who dares wake me with this clumsy song? Dark red light gathered in her throat. The air warped and crackled with heat. She was charging her breath weapon. One blast would erase me and everything behind me. This was the moment. Die or speak. I didn't step back. I stepped forward. I raised the burning gold coin above my head and shouted with everything I had. Great Wingburner, I am Farnell Reindort. I crossed wastelands and dangers to return what belongs to you. This coin bearing your mark. A Reindort does not steal. I came to give back your property and to seek a conversation with a true power. I added the gamble, if you believe. Burning a messenger who returns your treasure and stands before your fire without flinching is worthy of your greatness. Then do it. But this coin will witness your choice. The red glow in her throat froze. Her golden eyes locked onto the coin, then onto me. She could sense her own unique energy signature in the coin. She could also detect the faint but genuine Reindort bloodline running through my veins. Her mental voice came again. The fury dialed down to suspicious curiosity. Reindort, you used the calling song just to return this trinket. Her tail swept across the lava lake, sending up a wall of fire. She seemed almost offended at being woken for something so small. Yet my approach, the ancient ritual, the respect, the courage, kept her from simply incinerating me. I pressed my advantage carefully. I told her my bloodline was authentic, but I was exiled. I told her she had power that would shame many so-called purebloods. I suggested that a being of her extraordinary strength might want more than ruling a sulfur pit forever. Perhaps she wanted to see wider skies, gain greater power. A Reindort and a being like her working together could open doors neither could open alone. I deliberately let slip the faint scent of another dragon on me. The trace of Stimp, the young true dragon my family had taken. That caught her attention hard. Her nostrils flared. Another dragon. Young. Restrained. She noted with obvious interest. Then came the test. She sneered at my knights, calling them trembling insects. Prove your worth, child of Reindort, or become my snack. Her throat lit up again. Progressive dragon breath building. The heat from her neck alone could melt metal. Behind me, Barton was ready to charge in and die trying to save me. White Claw had her eyes shut in despair. I poured every drop of magic and bloodline energy I had into the gold coin. It erupted with a pulse of dragon aura, weak compared to her, but pure. For one instant, a ghostly silhouette of a young true dragon flickered above the coin and roared silently. She stopped. Her breath weapon dimmed. Those massive golden eyes stared at the phantom image, then at me. This tiny human radiating a will and a credential that didn't match his size. Silence. Just lava bubbling and wind howling. Finally, the red glow in her throat faded completely. She lowered her colossal head until it nearly touched me, her scorching breath whipping my hair and cloak. Interesting. Little insect, her mental voice said. Less mockery now. Real calculation. Your token and your nerve have bought your life. For now, she settled her immense body along the lava lake's edge like a black mountain range appearing from nowhere, wings folding slowly, those molten gold eyes never leaving me. Your proposal. She glanced past me at the terrified knights. Take your insects and leave. Tomorrow, when sunlight reaches the pass, come back. Alone, she paused, then added with forced casualness, "And leave my coin." Before I could respond, she beat her wings once. The blast of hot wind nearly knocked me flat and sank majestically back into the lava lake. The surface churned, then gradually stilled. Only the lingering pressure and the memory of those golden eyes remained. I stood there in the silence and let out the longest, most silent exhale of my life. I'd survived. More than that, I'd gotten through. The calling song, the returned coin, standing my ground before her fire, and the right words at the right moment had planted a seed in that proud, complicated creature's mind. She was a mutant, not a pure blood, and somewhere underneath that world-ending power was an insecurity I could work with. She wanted recognition. She wanted more than this volcanic prison, and I'd just shown her a door she'd never considered. I walked back out of the past to find Barton rushing toward me, his face a mix of lingering terror and raw admiration. I waved him off with a tired smile. "Make camp. Rest up. Tomorrow I have a private meeting to attend." I knew the real negotiation hadn't even started yet. Tomorrow I'd walk back in there alone, face those golden eyes again, and whatever happened in that conversation would decide everything. My future, my night's future, and whether House Reendort's dragon banner would ever fly again. The next morning I stood alone in Dragon Breath Pass at dawn, exactly as she demanded. No knights, no weapons that mattered against something like her. Just me. And then I waited. The sun climbed higher. 1 hour. 2 hours. Nearly noon. The lava lake stayed flat and quiet. I started wondering if she'd changed her mind, if I'd misread everything. Then my status ability told me the truth before my eyes did. She emerged slowly from the lava, not with yesterday's explosive fury, but sluggishly, like something dragging itself out of a warm bed. She shook her massive head, blinked those golden slit pupils against the midday sun, and finally focused on me. Her status screen flickered with something I almost couldn't believe. Just woken, slightly drowsy, faint embarrassment, forcibly projecting dignity. She'd overslept. This terrifying, mountain-sized, lava-dwelling dragon had slept through our appointment and left me standing here all morning. She'd probably been up late planning intimidating questions and then dozed off in her cozy magma pool. I wanted to scream. Inside my head, I cursed her out in every way I knew. But on the outside, I bowed calmly and said, "Good day, Wingburner. Thank you for coming as promised." Humph. Her mental voice blasted into my skull, dripping with fake authority and obvious crankiness. I always keep my word. She was embarrassed and trying to cover it. I could feel it, that stiff, overdone pride masking the fact that she knew I knew. And that made her want to skip straight past any careful conversation and go right to the most extreme test she could think of. Without warning, she slammed her enormous neck down to the edge of the pass, the tip nearly touching my boots. Rows of blade-sharp spines lined her scales like a forest of black daggers. "Get on. Now, ride her. Right now? No discussion, no negotiation. Just climb onto a furious dragon who was clearly taking out her embarrassment on me? What are you waiting for, pathetic insect? Are you afraid? No time to think." This was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the last stupid thing I'd ever do. I sprinted forward, jumped, and grabbed the lowest spine on her neck with both hands. The scales were ice cold on the surface, but I could feel volcanic heat pulsing underneath. Terrifying. Raw life force flowing through her body like underground rivers of magma. The dragon aura this close was suffocating. I scrambled upward, hand over hand, hauling myself up her neck like climbing a cliff made of razor-edged metal. The spines had rough barbs that tore through my gloves and scraped my skin. I'd barely reached a flatter section near the base of her neck, hadn't even managed to sit down properly. She launched. No countdown, no warning. Her wings exploded open with a sound like a thunderstorm breaking, and her hind legs blasted off the rock with enough force to crack stone. We went almost straight up, 90 degrees vertical, like an arrow fired from a siege crossbow. The G-force hit me like a giant's boot stomping on my chest. Blood rushed to my back. My vision collapsed to a narrow tunnel rimmed with black. Every molecule of air was crushed out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. I wasn't sitting on her. I was hanging, both arms wrapped around a spine, body dangling and flailing like a rag doll in a hurricane while she rocketed skyward. Below me, the lava lake and the pass shrank to toy-sized in seconds. If I let go, I'd fall thousands of meters on a molten rock. Don't let go. That single thought burned into my brain like a brand. I clenched until my knuckles went white, then passed white to bloodless gray. My teeth ground together so hard I thought my jaw would shatter. Every fiber of magic in my body poured into my arms and legs, fighting against forces no human body was designed to endure. We punched through the sulfur haze into clear sky. The ground became a distant painting. Mountains looked like sand castles. Then, just as I'd barely managed to wedge my legs against the neck and stabilize, she flipped. She folded her wings and rolled into a dive. Straight down. The weightlessness was 10 times worse than the climb. My stomach tried to exit through my throat. Blood flooded my head until my vision went red, then black. I wasn't riding a dragon anymore. I was strapped to a meteor plummeting toward Earth. Wind tore at me with physical violence, trying to rip me free and scatter me across the sky. And that was just the beginning. After the dive came a series of maneuvers that felt specifically designed to kill me. Brutal lateral turns where centrifugal force tried to fling me into empty space. Barrel rolls where sky and ground switched places so fast I lost all sense of direction. Sudden stops that slammed me forward, followed instantly by explosive acceleration that crushed me backward. My palms split open on the spine edges. Blood smeared across her black scales and was instantly whipped away by the wind. My muscles screamed from sustained maximum tension. My consciousness flickered, gray edges creeping in, threatening to swallow everything. Multiple times I came within a heartbeat of blacking out completely. But something kept me holding on. Not just survival instinct. Something fiercer. I'd walked through a wasteland, rallied an army, slaughtered enemies, faced down dragon fire, and dragged myself to this moment through sheer stubborn will. I was not going to fall off this overgrown lizard because she was throwing a tantrum about oversleeping. Somewhere in the middle of that hellish ride, something shifted in me. I stopped just enduring. I started feeling. Through the scales under my body, I could sense her muscles coiling and releasing. I could detect the flow of power shifting direction before she moved. Tiny vibrations through the dragon hide gave me split-second warnings of her next turn or dive. I adjusted my breathing to grab air in the brief pauses between maneuvers. I channeled what little magic I had left into my hands and feet for better grip. I stopped fighting the motion and started riding it, finding rhythm in the chaos, balance in the destruction. I became a stone that refused to erode, a barnacle welded to a warship's hull. I wasn't going anywhere. Then, without any signal, she stopped. The violent acrobatics simply ceased. Her wings spread wide and caught a high-altitude thermal, and she glided. Smooth, steady, almost gentle. The wind shifted from screaming assault to a deep, constant rush. I lay collapsed against her neck, wedged behind a massive spine, legs still clamped tight, but trembling uncontrollably. I was soaked in sweat, blood, and ash grime. Every muscle howled. Every nerve vibrated. I was the most wrecked I'd ever been in either of my lives. But when I lifted my head and looked down at the mountain ridges, reduced to sand ripples, at rivers of lava glowing like golden threads, at the impossible vastness of the world spread beneath me, everything else fell away. I'd done it. I'd survived. Not just survived, I'd passed her test. This cruel, proud, magnificent creature had tried to shake me loose with everything she had, and I was still here, bleeding and broken but clinging to her spine with bloody hands that refused to open. Her voice entered my mind again, quieter this time. The contempt wasn't gone, but it had thinned, replaced by something more measured, more real. Humph. It seems your claws are adequate, insect. You didn't disgrace my scales for too long. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd just tried to kill me for sport. As if that nightmare flight was a casual stroll and my survival merely met minimum standards. But I knew. Something between us had changed. I wasn't just a bug to be squashed anymore. I was something that had grabbed onto her and refused to be thrown off. And in the dragon world, that counted for something. I looked down at the world passing beneath us, felt her impossible power humming through scales under my ruined hands, and listened to wind that no longer wanted to murder me. My real journey in this world had just begun. When the wing burner landed me back at camp, every single night was frozen solid. Their lord, the exile, the cast-off, was sitting on the neck of a dragon that could wipe out an army. I was covered in blood and sweat, my armor torn up, hands shredded, but I was alive, and I was riding her. I slid down from her neck, my muscles screaming, and turned to face those enormous golden eyes one last time. Through our mental link, I told her simply, our alliance was sealed. She lowered her head and replied with her usual arrogance, remember your promises, insect. If you bore me, this pact breaks like lava foam. And don't expect me to obey your every petty command. Of course, I said. We're partners, not master and servant. That seemed to please her. She made a low rumbling sound in her throat. Dragon for approval, I think. Then everything exploded. Barton dropped to one knee first, slamming his fist against his chest so hard the sound echoed off the rocks. Then every knight followed. 120 armored warriors kneeling at once, the crash of metal like thunder rolling across the camp. My status ability went wild. Loyalty ratings across the board were skyrocketing to levels I'd never seen. Barton, reverence. Orson, fanatical. Old Hammer, absolute trust. Carl, worship, willing to die. They weren't following a disgraced nobleman anymore. They were following a dragon tamer who'd done the impossible. Even White Claw and Gray Leaf, huddled at the edge of camp, stared with their mouths open. I kept my face calm and just nodded. Mystery and authority, I needed to maintain both. Then came the practical question, how does a 300-meter dragon travel with a cavalry column? I offered the wing burner a choice, fly ahead to scout my territory or travel with us. I expected her to fly. She sneered at the idea of walking with crawling insects, but then she surprised me. She said she'd come along, and she knew how to hide herself. She went back to her lair first. I watched her seal her treasure hoard with boulders the size of houses, then weld the gaps shut with precision dragon fire that melted rock into volcanic glass. Only when she was satisfied her gold was safe did she return. Then, in front of everyone, her body began to glow with dark red light. That mountain of black scales shrank, twisted, reformed. In a few heartbeats, the terrifying dragon was gone. Standing in her place was a woman, over 2 meters tall, wearing what looked like armor made from her own scales, black with glowing red lava-line patterns. Wheat-brown skin radiating warmth and power. Wild, striking features with full lips curved in a permanent smirk. Black hair cascading to her waist with red-tipped ends like cooling magma. And on her forehead, 2 curved black horns that she hadn't bothered to hide, along with those unmistakable molten gold slit pupils. She radiated danger and presence even in this form. Standing, she was nearly eye level with me on horseback. This acceptable? She said, a real voice now, husky and magnetic, dripping with lazy authority. Walking with you insects sounds tedious, but fine. I swallowed hard. The Reindort bloodline memories mentioned dragons taking human form, but I never expected this mutant wyvern could do it, and certainly not like this. I heard every knight behind me inhale sharply at the same time. Works for me, I managed. Much more practical. Before we left, I settled things with White Claw. I kept my promise and then some. The payment we'd agreed on, plus a pile of captured armor, weapons, and spears from the battles we'd fought. Junk to my knights. But for 2 tribalist beast folk girls with nothing, it was a fortune they could use to arm themselves or trade for survival. White Claw looked at the gear, then at me, and bowed her head low. Thank you, Lord. Her voice was quiet, layered with gratitude and something harder to name. I just nodded and turned away. A fair deal concluded. Maybe the small kindness would pay off someday on the frontier. Maybe not. Either way, it cost me nothing. She grabbed Gray Leaf's hand and disappeared into the rocky shadows without looking back. A flash of white tail, and they were gone. We moved out. Destination, Starnight Domain. The wing burner, in her human form, didn't bother with a horse. She simply walked beside my mount with long, unhurried strides that somehow kept pace with trotting dragon blood war horses. Like a dark flame drifting alongside the column, silent and terrifying. The days that followed were strange. The knights couldn't get used to her. She never told anyone her human form name, and I didn't ask. She barely spoke, occasionally toying with glowing crystal stones she seemed to produce from nowhere. During meals, she'd take my portion of meat without asking, eating with movements that looked elegant but were really just a predator tearing into prey. Hard bread and porridge she refused with visible disgust. Anyone who muttered a complaint got a single glance from those gold eyes and went instantly mute. At camp, she never lifted a finger to help. She'd find the cleanest rock with the best view and sit there, or hover a few inches off the ground surrounded by a heat shimmer that pushed back the night cold. Nights sleeping near her actually stayed warmer, which was an unintentional benefit. Barton pulled me aside, worried about her constant presence. I told him she was our most important ally and our greatest deterrent. Treat her with respect, keep the men in line, no offensive behavior. She's my dragon, I said. I tried talking to her about dragon lore and local geography. Mostly I got short, mocking answers or looks that said I was an idiot. You think I'm one of those metallic dragons who love lecturing in human castles? Insect. Power is knowledge. Survival is law. Everything else is meaningless, but I found a crack. When I showed her the magic cores we'd taken from the lizard tribe and asked about absorbing their energy more efficiently, she actually engaged. She demonstrated by draining a mid-grade fire core between her fingertips in seconds, turning it to dust, then grudgingly explained that our crude absorption method wasted 70% of the energy. She hinted at filtering and channeling techniques. I tried them and felt immediate improvement. That's how it would work with her, I realized. No normal conversation. Just mining fragments of knowledge from her offhand remarks and learning by observation. She had a complicated relationship with the Rian name. She'd mock pure-blooded dragons as lazy lumps sleeping on inherited treasure, but then show strange interest in the faint scent of stimp. My family's young dragon, that still lingered on me. One night, she spoke up unprompted. That dragon's presence on you is fading. Your bond is weakening. I thought Rian were supposed to coexist with dragons. Can't even keep your own partner? I told her the truth. Family politics, my exile, stimp being confiscated. She called it stupid infighting, though I couldn't tell if she felt sorry for me or enjoyed my misery. Then she added, with a hint of genuine interest, the worse the situation, the more interesting things it forces out. Isn't that right? I didn't answer, but I felt my value in her eyes tick up slightly. An underdog with special blood who might bring change. That was something worth watching, in dragon terms. Her presence made the rest of the journey remarkably smooth. Every monster, bandit, and predator within miles could sense the apex creature walking with us and fled or froze. Better than any scout network. I used the peaceful travel time to plan. Starnight Domain sat on the Empire's southeast border, right against Druna Kingdom territory. A classic buffer zone that nobody cared about, war-ravaged, depopulated, probably nothing left but ruins. The previous lord's entire family was reportedly dead. I'd need to build from absolute zero. People, resources, infrastructure, diplomacy with Druna, managing imperial attention, watching for family interference. A mountain of problems. But I had 120 elite magic knights, a dragon ally, and knowledge from another world. I felt the weight of responsibility, but no fear. Just a grim excitement. After about 2 weeks of marching, we finally cleared the last stretch of barren hills. The terrain flattened, the sulfur smell long gone, replaced by earth, grass, and a faint whiff of decay. A scout galloped back. My lord, the edge of Draken Canyon is just ahead. Beyond it lies Starnight Domain's core area. I spurred my horse up a small rise and looked out. What I saw made my stomach sink. A massive canyon slashed across the earth like a wound, deep and dark with the glint of a river far below. Connecting the two sides was a single bridge, a rickety thing made of wood and thick vines that looked like it might collapse under one horse. On this side of the canyon, near the bridgehead, scattered ruins of crude stone and wood buildings lay half-collapsed and overgrown. Beyond them, abandoned fields choked with weeds. No smoke, no people, no signs of life at all. And in the air, mixed with the smell of grass and dirt, something fresher than old decay. Recent death. This was Starnight Domain. Somehow even worse than I'd imagined. Barton rode up beside me, his expression grim. My lord, this. The wingburner strolled to the hilltop, scanned the ruins with her golden eyes, and smirked. This is the territory you promised? Insect. It doesn't even qualify as a temporary nest for me. I ignored her. My status ability was already feeding me warnings. The area read as abandoned and dead, but with recent unnatural deaths and a faint sense of hostile observation. Something was watching us. The bridge might be trapped. The ruins could hide an ambush. Barton, I said, feeling a headache building, send 2 squads to scout both sides of the canyon and the outer ruins. Everyone else holds position. Nobody goes near that bridge without my order. Yes, my lord. The wing burner crossed her arms, watching me with amused interest. Oh, found something, little lord? It's too quiet, I said flatly. Even ruins should have insects and rats. And that smell, I pointed toward the buildings, isn't just old rot. Some of it's fresh. This wasteland already had occupants, and they knew we were here. I sent 2 squads to scout the ruins and the far side of the canyon while the rest of the column held position in battle formation. The wing burner stood at my side, golden eyes narrowed, sensing something in the air. The squad that checked the ruins came back first. They'd found survivors, about 20 or 30 people, mostly old folks, women, and children, hiding in a half-collapsed cellar. Starving, beaten, terrified. An old man told them they were original residents of Star Knight Domain. About 2 weeks ago, a group of armed men had shown up, seized the area, killed anyone who resisted, and drove the rest into hiding. I asked if it was Druna soldiers or bandits. The squad leader's face twisted with a strange expression. Neither. The occupiers were flying Imperial colors. They were private soldiers from a place called Greyrock Fortress, belonging to a minor baron named Herbert Stoneclaw. Before I could process that, the second squad came racing back from across the bridge with even worse news. They'd spotted the castle, Star Knight Castle, marked on the map as the seat of my domain. And the flags flying over it weren't the re-endorsed black dragon banner. They were gray and silver star flags, alongside the Empire's golden lion standard. Something inside me nearly snapped. Blood rushed to my head so fast my vision went dark for a second. I clenched my fists until my nails cut into my palms. Not Druna, not bandits. My own Empire's people. Some nobody baron had waltzed into my legally granted territory before I even arrived and planted his flag on my castle. They'd treated my domain like unclaimed land, like I didn't exist, like the imperial decree giving me this territory was worthless paper. I thought about everything. The brutal march through the wilderness, dodging imperial patrols, fighting beast folk, facing down a dragon, all to get here. And the whole time, some petty noble was already squatting in my home. The wing burner leaned close, her hot breath on my ear, voice dripping with mockery. Seems your fellow humans don't think much of you, little lord. Can't even keep your own front door. Pathetic insect. I turned on her with a stare cold enough to freeze lava. What's mine, nobody takes. Anyone who reaches for it loses the hand. My voice was quiet, but the killing intent was real enough to make even her raise an eyebrow. She looked more interested than offended. I ordered Barton to push the column forward to the bridgehead and send a messenger across. The message was simple. The Viscount of Star Knight Domain, Farnell Riendort, had arrived. Lower the bridge, send the commanding officer to explain, and return the castle. They had 30 minutes. After that, I'd treat it as rebellion and take everything by force. Every knight heard me. The fury in the ranks was instant and unified. Exiled by family, ignored by the Empire, and now robbed of their last foothold, they wanted blood. The black column rolled forward into attack formation at the bridge. Weapons checked, enchantments charged, dragon blood horses stamping and snarling. A single rider crossed the swaying bridge as my messenger. I sat on my horse staring at that castle with its wrong flags, letting my rage burn cold and focused. This wasn't just about a building. If I backed down today, nobody on this border would ever respect me. Star Knight Domain would stay a joke on paper forever. I had to tear out this thorn root and stem and make anyone watching understand exactly who owned this land. The wing burner toyed with a red crystal, watching my face with growing amusement. Now this is getting interesting, insect. 30 minutes passed. The bridge didn't move. The castle gates stayed shut. No one came out. I raised my hand, ready to give the order to attack. My lord, the messenger's returning. The rider came galloping back across the bridge with the strangest expression on his face. Not angry, not relieved, confused. What he told me changed everything. The castle wasn't held by Greyrock invaders. It was held by a woman named Eleonora, the daughter of the previous lord, Baron Calvin, and supposedly the last surviving member of his bloodline. She and her remaining people were actually under siege by the Greyrock forces, who had set up camp outside the castle walls with a substantial army. Eleonora acknowledged my imperial appointment as legally valid, but she insisted that Star Knight Domain was her family's ancestral land, and as the only direct heir of Baron Calvin, she had undeniable inheritance rights. She refused to hand over the castle and core territory unconditionally. My first reaction was disbelief. She was trapped in her own castle, besieged, probably starving, and she was still clinging to her claim of legitimacy? What kind of stubbornness was that? The wing-burner laughed out loud. See? This is your human's precious, noble dignity. Nearly dead inside their shell, but hugging that tattered flag like treasure. Stupid and hilarious. I couldn't argue. It was absurd. But my brain was already working past the anger. The messenger continued with the real problem. The Greyrock siege force was serious. Roughly 50 magic knights, over 1,000 fully armored soldiers, plus slave laborers. Commanded by someone named Horn, the Baron's nephew. For a minor Baron's domain, this was a major investment. Stoneclaw had gone all in on grabbing Star Knight. I did the math fast. My 120 elite magic knights could beat 50 of theirs. Individually, we were far superior in equipment and training. But 1,000 armored infantry couldn't be ignored. A head-on assault would cost me knights I couldn't replace. And inside the castle sat Eleonora with her legitimate heir claim. If I bled myself fighting Greyrock, she might use the opportunity to strengthen her position, or some other vulture might swoop in. I could unleash the wing-burner and end it in minutes. But what would the Empire say about a dragon attack on Imperial subjects? And would Eleonora's rightful heir status give the Empire an excuse to brand me a rebel? Rage wouldn't solve this. I needed strategy. I took a deep breath and forced myself completely calm. Barton, change of plans. We don't attack yet. He looked startled. I cut him off. We talk first. With Eleonora, I sent a new message to the castle. A formal request for a meeting between myself and Eleonora. Neutral ground, the midpoint of the bridge, small escort on each side. I framed it around our shared enemy. Greyrock was a threat to both of us, and we should discuss cooperation. The question of who ultimately controlled the territory could be settled after the invaders were dealt with. It was a calculated move. If she refused to talk, she'd face Greyrock alone and alienate the one person with enough military power to save her. If she accepted, she'd be implicitly recognizing my authority and stepping onto my terms. Either way, I held the stronger hand. The wing-burner watched me shift from fury to cold negotiation with visible appreciation. Oh, not going to just stab through the shell and the flies outside at once. Learning to use your brain, insect. Though it doesn't look like a very good one. I glanced at her. Why waste strength on what diplomacy can handle? Of course, if diplomacy fails, I let the silence fill in the rest. The new messenger rode across. I waited, watching the castle and the Greyrock camps beyond it, mind already running through scenarios. The Baron's forces were a real threat, but not unsolvable. The real puzzle was how to eliminate the external invader and neutralize the internal challenger at the lowest possible cost. Everything depended on what happened in that meeting with Eleonora, and whether she was smart enough to recognize which way the wind was blowing. While waiting for Eleonora's response, I didn't sit idle. I sent a second messenger, this time to the Greyrock camp outside the castle. No hostility, just a formal visit. I presented myself as the new Viscount of Star Knight Domain and politely asked what their army was doing on my land. I also expressed a desire to meet their commander, Knight Horn. Barton worried it was risky. I told him that was exactly why we needed to do it. Baron Herbert Stoneclaw hadn't sent 1,000 soldiers and 50 magic knights this far from home just for random raiding. He had a plan, and I needed to know what it was before deciding how to handle him. My messenger reached the Greyrock camp, which was well organized with strong patrols. These weren't amateurs. He was brought before Horn, a tall young man in his 20s with sharp eyes and expensive enchanted plate armor. The kind of officer who combined battlefield experience with a noble's arrogance. Horn read my letter, said nothing, and sent my messenger away to rest. Then he pulled out a small magic communication charm and contacted Baron Stoneclaw directly. What happened on the other end of that conversation, I pieced together later from how things played out. Horn reported our arrival, 100+ magic knights on dragon-blood warhorses, all elite, claiming to be under the new Imperial Viscount. Stoneclaw was surprised. He'd expected the discarded re-endured heir to either never show up or arrive with nothing. A full Magic Knight squadron wasn't in his calculations. The Baron was a shrewd man. He built his small domain through careful timing and smart deals, not just fighting. His original plan had been to grab Star Knight during the gap between the old lord's death and the new appointment. He'd even tried to marry Eleonora to absorb the territory legally, but she'd refused, which forced him into a siege. Now the legitimate, imperially appointed lord had arrived with real muscle. Stoneclaw ran the numbers fast. Fighting my knights would cost him dearly even if he won. Getting caught in a war against an officially recognized viscount backed by the Riendort name would create political problems that could ruin his future expansion plans. And he'd already grabbed plenty of loot and captives from the surrounding area during the weeks he'd been here. The smart move was to cut losses and leave. His orders to Horn were clear. Claimed they'd only come to maintain order after hearing about bandit and Druna remnant activity in the area. Now that the proper lord had arrived, they would respectfully withdraw in accordance with imperial law. Oh, and privately hint that they'd spent considerable resources on this peacekeeping mission and would appreciate some compensation. It was shameless, but politically clean. A face-saving exit with a little extortion on the side. When my messenger brought back this response, I almost laughed. I'd expected a standoff, maybe a battle. Instead, the Baron folded the moment he saw a real opponent. No fight, no blood, just a calculation that said, not worth it. Herbert Stoneclaw was a smart man. Smart enough to be dangerous in the long run, but also smart enough to do business with when interests aligned. I filed that away for later. I told Barton to accept the deal. 50 gold coins as a thank you for their trouble maintaining order. A trivial amount, barely a gesture, but enough to let both sides save face. They could tell their Baron they got paid, and I could say I settled things without wasting a single knight's life. Barton was visibly relieved. His brothers wouldn't have to bleed today. That same afternoon, the Greyrock army began packing up. Tents came down, wagons loaded, columns formed. They moved out with crisp efficiency, good discipline, no stalling. Horn even sent a courtesy message as he left. Until we meet again. I stood at the bridge watching them go, feeling something between satisfaction and wariness. A battle I'd been ready to fight had evaporated through nothing more than showing up with enough strength to make fighting pointless. No clever strategy, no bloodshed, just the raw math of power making the decision for everyone. The wing burner appeared at my elbow, watching the retreating army with obvious disappointment. TCH. No fighting. Boring. You humans and your endless scheming. No fun at all. Sometimes, I said quietly, winning without fighting is the best victory. She made a dismissive sound but didn't argue. The biggest external threat was gone. Now I could focus on what remained. The stubborn woman inside that castle who still thought she owned this place, and the enormous task of rebuilding a ruined domain from nothing. I looked at Star Knight Castle, its gates still shut, her family's gray and silver flag still flying. My position had just gotten much stronger. With Greyrock gone, Eleonora had lost her excuse to refuse talks. She was alone in there with dwindling supplies and no allies, while I stood outside with 120 magic knights and a dragon. The meeting with her was next, and this time, I held almost every card. The next morning, fog hung over Draken Canyon as I prepared for the meeting with Eleonora. I chose the middle of the old suspension bridge as the meeting point, neutral ground that belonged to neither of us, swaying over the abyss below. But before any talking, I needed to set the tone. I asked the wing burner to make an entrance. She'd called the whole idea of a bug meeting boring, but when I told her I needed help intimidating a stubborn little bug, a spark of cruel amusement lit up those golden eyes. She agreed. As Eleonora's party emerged from the castle, her in oversized silver-gray armor inherited from her dead father and brothers, flanked by 10 aging knights who looked like they'd fight to the last breath for her, the wing burner struck. A sound like the earth itself groaning rolled across the canyon. Then her shadow fell over everything. She descended in full dragon form, 340 meters of wingspan blotting out the morning sun, black scales gleaming, crown like horns piercing the clouds, molten gold eyes staring down at the bridge with divine indifference. Every wing beat sent the bridge swinging violently. The air turned thick with sulfur and soul-crushing dragon aura. Eleonora's knights nearly fell off their horses. Their mounts screamed and reared. The old warriors went ghost white, clinging to their reins with shaking hands. Eleonora herself was trembling so badly her armor rattled, face drained of all color, barely conscious under the weight of that ancient predatory pressure. And then I appeared. I climbed down the wing-burner's neck and stood on top of her massive head, looking down at them from above, black cloak whipping in the wind, standing on a dragon's skull over a bottomless canyon. The image of absolute power. I let it sink in for a long moment. Then I patted the wing-burner's scales. She made a satisfied rumble. She'd enjoyed that thoroughly, and lifted away, vanishing into the clouds above. I dropped from her head to the bridge, landing lightly in front of the still paralyzed Eleonora. "Eleonora Calvin," I said, calm as if nothing unusual had happened. She fought her way back from the edge of fainting. Her voice shook badly, but she forced words out. "Yes. Viscount. Riendort, I've already sent the Greyrock forces away," I told her. "Now let's talk about Starnight Domain's future." What happened next surprised me. This girl, 16, maybe 17, thin and pale and clearly starving, had just watched a mountain-sized dragon hover over her head, and she still pushed back. "Thank you for driving out the invaders," she said, voice steadying as she spoke. "But Starnight Domain is my family's ancestral land. My father and brothers died protecting it. As the last of the Calvin bloodline, I have the right to inherit it." Her eyes burned with desperate determination. She knew exactly what losing this territory meant. The end of her family name, her identity reduced to a political marriage with some minor noble who wanted her title for decoration. Everything her dead family had fought for, erased. I had to admit, that took guts. Minutes after being terrorized by a living dragon, she was standing her ground on principle. Foolish? Maybe, but I respected it more than I expected to. My first instinct was to crush her resistance with brute authority. But I stopped myself. The politics were more complicated than raw power could solve. Imperial law had a gray area between hereditary succession and royal appointment. Both claims had legal weight. If I forcibly evicted a young noblewoman whose family had died defending the border, it would look terrible. Other lords would distrust me. The Stuart family might use it as ammunition. Even if the Empire sided with my appointment, the moral stain could haunt me for years. And honestly, even if the Empire didn't give me this specific territory, they'd have to give me something comparable to keep my loyalty and my knight's swords useful. Fighting over this particular patch of ruins wasn't worth burning bridges. So I made a different play. I acknowledged her family's sacrifice with genuine respect. The Calvins had bled for the border, and that deserved honor. Then I firmly restated my legal position. The imperial appointment was valid and non-negotiable. But instead of demanding she surrender, I proposed that we both submit the ownership question to the Imperial Senate for official ruling. Let the highest authority decide, based on law, tradition, and circumstances. In the meantime, I offered a temporary arrangement. I wouldn't enter the castle. My forces would camp on this side of the canyon, in the ruined settlement area, and take responsibility for defense, security, and rebuilding order. She could stay in the castle with her people. We'd cooperate on practical matters, clearing ruins, settling refugees, restoring basic stability. Because regardless of who ended up as Lord, this land and its people needed help now. It was a generous-looking offer. In reality, it put me in the strongest position. I held the official appointment, the hardest legal document. She'd have to prove the Empire's vacant territory designation was wrong, which was an uphill battle. Meanwhile, I'd be the one actually governing, defending, and rebuilding the domain. By the time any ruling came down, I'd be the lord in everything but the castle flag. Eleonora stared at me for a long time. I could read the war behind her eyes. Fear, suspicion, exhaustion, and a tiny ember of hope that maybe she wouldn't lose everything today. Finally, she agreed. We'd submit the question to the Empire. Until then, we'd coexist and cooperate. Peaceful, civilized, proper. We parted. I rode back to my side feeling satisfied. This was the right move. Patient, politically clean, impossible to criticize. The wing burner was waiting in human form, leaning against a rock with crossed arms and a mocking smile. Done talking? Didn't even fight. Boring. You just let that little thing go? I smiled faintly. Why rush? Sometimes boiling the frog slowly is more effective than burning it alive. This territory will be mine. I just need a more civilized approach. She snorted but said nothing. Behind me, 120 knights awaited orders, and ahead lay a ruined domain waiting to be rebuilt from nothing. The castle across the canyon still flew Eleonora's flag, but that was fine. I had time. I had strength. And I had plans that went far beyond one stubborn girl and her crumbling walls. The first week at Starnight Domain was all about building. My knights transformed the ruined settlement on the north side of the canyon into a proper military outpost with terrifying efficiency. They worked like a precision machine, hauling stone and timber, using the dragon blood horses to drag heavy materials and even melt scrap metal with controlled flame breath. Defensive walls went up, barracks took shape, magic traps and warning wards were placed at every key point. No wasted motion, no unnecessary noise. Just the cold symphony of construction. I spent my days overseeing everything, going over defensive plans with Barton, running tactical scenarios on a crude sand table. Not just for the castle across the canyon. We planned for possible Greyrock retaliation, Drunna raids, and whatever the Empire might throw at us next. Nights were for training. I'd sit alone in my tent absorbing magic cores from the lizard tribe's horde. The process hurt. Wild elemental energy crashing through my body like fire and ice fighting inside my veins. But I could feel my magic reserves growing, slowly and steadily. This was the foundation of personal power, and I couldn't afford to slack. The Wingburners, teaching, continued in her usual style, 90% mockery, 10% gold. She'd watch me struggle with energy absorption and call me a pathetic insect trying to touch power's edge through cheap tricks. But when I hit a genuine wall, she'd sometimes drop a single sentence that cut straight to the heart of the problem. Energy isn't water you can direct wherever you want. It's like breathing, like a heartbeat. Follow its nature. These fragments were worth more than any textbook. I tried once to imitate dragon aura to scare off a wild beast that wandered into camp. Failed completely. She laughed and told me I looked like a sheep wearing a wolf's skin. Dragon pressure came from a higher order of existence and soul essence, not from squinting hard and pushing out a trickle of magic. Humiliating, but educational. Her attitude toward me was shifting, though. The amusing toy look was fading. Now she watched me more like she was curious how far this particular insect could climb. A tiny change, but I noticed. She came and went as she pleased, disappearing to scout the surrounding mountains for a proper lair, or hunt for food in her dragon form. When she stayed, she'd lounge on a massive rock that I'd had the horses heat polish with dragon breath into a smooth, warm throne for her. She'd sit there playing with glowing crystals, occasionally critiquing the construction. That pillar's crooked. Your defensive array's energy flow is embarrassingly stiff. Her mere presence was a constant pressure on the castle across the canyon. Even from this distance, her faint dragon aura and sulfur scent reminded everyone on the other side what lived over here. The castle stayed silent. Eleonora's gray and silver flag still flew, but weakly. The gates never opened. I could sometimes spot armored figures on the walls, but no communication came. From her tower, I knew she could see everything. Our camp growing by the day, the Wingburners' horned silhouette, the black-armored knights moving. With inhuman coordination. Every time she looked at the Wingburner, she probably relived that moment on the bridge when dragon aura nearly crushed her soul. On the 7th day, the balance broke. An Imperial courier squad came riding hard into my camp, flying official messenger flags. In my command tent, I took the sealed document from a stiff-faced bureaucrat and unrolled it. I read it carefully, keeping my expression neutral at first. Then my jaw tightened. Then I laughed. A short, cold laugh with no humor in it. The Imperial Senate had delivered its masterwork of fence-sitting. On the territory question, they'd split the baby with surgical precision. Eleonora Calvin got the castle, plus 2 or 3 small towns and several villages near the Imperial heartland. The safest, most intact, most manageable slice, about 1/6 of the original domain. She was formally recognized as a baroness. A neat package that preserved the Calvin name, gave her something real to live on, and let the Empire claim it hadn't abandoned a loyal family's orphan. I got the remaining 5/6, the war-ravaged western lands. And as a bonus, they generously added several chunks of unclaimed territory west of Starnight, right against the Drunna border. These sounded impressive on paper, In reality, they were scorched earth full of ruins, bandits, and enemy guerrilla squads. The Empire was handing me the most dangerous stretch of frontier and calling it a gift. Classic. Give the expendable newcomer the biggest, worst piece of the pie and let him either tame it or die trying. But the real gut punch was the second part of the document. A military order, worded with zero flexibility. I was to report immediately to the 9th Legion on the Imperial Eastern Campaign's left flank to participate in the White Wave River, Iron Oak Fortress offensive. The order specifically mentioned, in bold text, including any tamed flying war beasts under his command, flying war beasts. The Wingburner. My blood went cold, then hot. I knew instantly where this information had come from. Eleonora, that seemingly fragile girl huddled in her castle, had written to the Empire about my dragon. In her petition about the territory, she must have described the Wingburner in detail. Whether she did it to protect herself, to make trouble for me, or both, the result was the same. Before this, the Empire probably didn't care much about one exiled Reindort. Let him rot on the border. But a wild dragon? For an army locked in a grinding campaign, desperate for a breakthrough? That was a weapon too valuable to ignore. I swallowed the rage and thought it through. Refusing an imperial military order wasn't an option. That would make me an actual rebel, giving everyone from the stewards to random border lords legal justification to destroy me. And honestly, participating in the campaign might not be all bad. Military achievements would strengthen my political position. Combat experience would further bind my knights to me. And having the Empire owe me favors was worth something. The real question was the Wingburner. How would she react to being deployed as a military asset? She'd agreed to an alliance with me, not servitude to an empire she didn't care about. That was a conversation for the road. Barton, I said, voice flat and calm. Full mobilization. We march at dawn tomorrow. Destination, 9th Legion, Eastern Campaign left flank. He didn't question it. Military orders were military orders, and for Reindort Knights, the battlefield was where they belonged. I had the territory ruling copied and sent across to Eleonora's castle. I made sure to address her as Baroness, letting the slight formality carry its own message. I told her the Empire had ruled. I expected her to comply, and she was not to touch or occupy my camp while I was gone. When I returned from the front, we'd settle the remaining boundary details. The camp shifted into pre-deployment mode. Equipment checks, supply loading, weapons maintenance. All done with the same silent efficiency that defined everything my knights did, but with an added edge of combat readiness. Eleonora's castle sent no reply. No messenger, no acknowledgement. But as the sun was setting, a slightly smaller version of her family's gray and silver flag rose on the castle's main tower. Silent acceptance. She'd gotten her castle and her title. Whether it tasted like relief or ashes, I didn't know and didn't care. At dawn the next morning, the column was ready. I mounted my horse and took one last look at the canyon, my half-built outpost on this side, the silent castle on the other, the rickety bridge between them. No sentimentality, just a mental note. This is mine, and I'm coming back for it. Move out. The black river of armored riders surged eastward toward the war-stained horizon. The Wingburner walked at my side in human form, those golden slit eyes fixed on the east. She didn't care about leaving. If anything, she looked eager. Her lips curved into a dangerous smile. Finally going to crush something worthwhile. Insect, she murmured. I hope these so-called enemies are less boring than wooden castles. I said nothing. My mind was already racing ahead, to the campaign, to the 9th Legion's politics, to how I'd manage a dragon on an imperial battlefield without losing control of my own fate. One crisis was barely behind me, and the next was already roaring toward us. But that was the shape of this life now. One battle after another, each one building toward something bigger. And I intended to come back from this war stronger, richer, and with enough achievements that nobody, not the Empire, not the Stuarts, not Eleonora, not anyone, could ever treat me as disposable again. The road to the White Wave River front was everything terrible about war compressed into a single highway. My column pushed through a river of human misery, soldiers from a dozen different units all mixed together, supply wagons stuck in mud with drivers beating half-dead horses, conscripted civilians hauling loads like pack animals under the crack of overseers' whips. Between the official traffic swarmed the parasites that follow every army. Merchants selling bad liquor, painted women working from ragged tents, mercenaries with hungry eyes scanning for opportunity. The smell was unbearable. Sweat, animal stink, rotting leather, cheap alcohol, and underneath it all, the sickly sweet stench of decomposing flesh drifting from roadside ditches. I saw at least one dead soldier stripped of his armor by his own comrades, left for the flies. Nobody even glanced at the body. My 100-odd black-armored knights cut through this chaos like a blade through mud. We drew every eye. The dragon-blood horses towered over normal mounts, scales gleaming, red eyes burning with intelligence, sulfur-tinged breath making nearby animals panic and shy away. Our enchanted black plate armor, the dragon face visors, the absolute silence of our formation. We were something from another world compared to the rabble around us. But it was the wing-burner who truly froze people in their tracks. Walking beside my horse in human form, over 2 meters tall in her black scale armor, dragon horns catching the sunlight, golden slit pupils sweeping over the crowd with lazy contempt. Everyone she looked at instinctively dropped their gaze. Even hardened veterans and arrogant mercenary captains went quiet when they noticed the re-endured dragon crest on our armor. The family name still carried weight. A dragon-taming dynasty wasn't something you provoked, even a fallen one. As we got closer to the river, I started seeing the real cost of the campaign. War golems, massive stone constructs, 30 or 40 meters tall, lay shattered along the road like discarded toys. One had its chest punched clean through, the edges melted and re-solidified by some horrific energy attack. Another was snapped in half at the waist, its magical circuits still flickering blue in its exposed guts like a dying heartbeat. A third had been torn apart by enormous vines, dried but still tough, wrapped around the wreckage. Druid magic. The druids of Druna Kingdom could do that to something the size of a building. These wrecks told me everything about what lay ahead. The Empire wasn't rolling through easy victories. The enemy was fighting back with everything they had, and it was working. After days of marching through this mess, we finally reached the main camp on the western bank of White Wave River. It was enormous, a city of tents and fortifications stretching to the horizon, organized with military precision that made the chaotic supply road look like a different war entirely. Wooden palisades, trenches, watchtowers, unit flags everywhere. The noise of tens of thousands of people, drills, blacksmiths, horses, shouted orders, merged into a constant low roar like a sleeping giant's breathing. Our imperial orders got us waved through immediately. A courier led us through layer after layer of security until we reached the 9th Legion's headquarters. The guards here were a different breed, sharp-eyed veterans radiating killing intent, high-level knights standing at the tent entrance like iron statues. I told Barton to settle the knights in our assigned area and went in with only the wing-burner following me. I didn't stop her. Sometimes displaying unusual assets was the right move. Inside the command tent, a massive sand table dominated the space, showing both banks of White Wave River in precise detail, with the fortress of iron oak prominently modeled on the eastern shore. Standing over it was General Antonio, commander of the 9th Legion. A broad, weathered man in polished officer's plate covered in campaign medals, white at the temples, eyes like knife edges. He radiated the authority of someone who'd commanded armies for decades. When we entered, his gaze hit me first, 2 seconds of evaluation. I could read it clearly, surprise at how young I was, doubt about the Exile label, quick calculation. Then his eyes moved past me to the wing burner, and even this battle-hardened general couldn't stop his pupils from contracting. He'd been briefed, but seeing her in person, the horns, the molten gold eyes, the inhuman pressure radiating from her body, was something reports couldn't prepare you for. He recovered fast. Viscount Farnell re-endured. I stepped forward and gave a clean imperial salute. Reporting as ordered, General. My unit is at your disposal. No pleasantries. He went straight to the sand table and laid out the entire strategic picture, and for the first time, I understood the true scale of what I'd walked into. The Imperial Eastern Campaign Army was split into 3 parts. The rear guard sat miles behind us, protecting supply lines for nearly 1 million soldiers, a massive, politically complicated operation. The center held the river crossings and bridgeheads, serving as the command hub and reserve. The vanguard consisted of 16 main legions split into 3 attack groups, each besieging one of 3 Druna fortresses across the river. I'd been assigned to the left wing, under Marshal Raymond, for legions including the 9th, tasked with flanking support and currently grinding against Iron Oak Fortress. Then came the numbers, and they hit hard. The left wing alone had over 320,000 troops, 150,000 Imperial regulars, including 6,300 Magic Knights, 5,100 Battle Aura Knights, 4,000 mages of various schools, 30,000 heavy infantry, plus light infantry, archers, and support troops. Another 170,000 were conscripted noble private armies, mixed quality, some excellent, some barely functional, and 80,000 expendable shock troops made up of slaves, prisoners, and mercenaries whose job was simply to absorb enemy resources before they died. Material assets: 55 war golems originally assigned to the left wing. 21 destroyed, 3 heavily damaged. Only 31 still operational. The wrecks I'd passed on the road now had cold numbers attached to them. Air power: about 14,800 riders on Griffins, Pegasi, and tamed Storm Eagles. The Empire's tools for air superiority, fast strikes, and precision attacks. And facing all of this was Iron Oak Fortress. Antonio's voice went heavier as he described it. Walls 60 meters high, built from granite mixed with dark iron ore. Multiple magic towers inside, creating linked defensive barriers and long-range magical bombardment capability. Thousands of heavy crossbows and catapults covering every approach. But the worst part was the druids. They'd grown war treants, living plant constructs that fought without fear, repaired wall damage, and entangled siege equipment. They'd summoned swarms of forest magical beasts, giant burrowing worms from underground, flying acid-spitting moths, poisonous creatures of every kind. The Empire had been hammering the fortress for days, inflicting heavy casualties on the defenders, but taking serious losses themselves. The Druna air forces were disorganized but numerous and vicious, wearing down the Griffin and Pegasus riders through sheer attrition. The war treants were proving far tougher than anyone had predicted. The siege was stuck. Then Antonio's gaze locked onto me, and onto the wing burner behind me, with unmistakable intent. Your arrival, and your special combat asset, were specifically requested by Marshal Raymond himself, he said, each word landing like a hammer blow. Iron Oak is a stalemate. Conventional approaches cost too much and move too slowly. We need something that can tear open their shell. Your dragon is that something. He laid out the mission directly. The wing burner was to prioritize destroying the magic towers inside the fortress, crippling their defensive barriers. Secondary targets were the beast swarms, heavy wall-mounted weapons, and the war treants. Clear the way for a full-scale ground assault. The tent went silent. Every staff officer stared at me. The weight of an entire siege, hundreds of thousands of lives, the outcome of a campaign, was being placed on one dragon and one young Viscount nobody had heard of a month ago. I understood the game perfectly. The Empire didn't care about my 120 knights, a drop in a 300,000-man ocean. They wanted the wing burner. I was just the leash they hoped was attached to her. They were using me, and I was going to let them, because I needed what they could give in return: military achievements, political standing, and enough credibility that nobody could ever call me disposable again. Understood, General, I said, voice steady. She will be on the battlefield, and the mission will be completed. I didn't explain my complicated alliance with the wing burner. I didn't mention that she wasn't a pet or a weapon I could simply point and fire. None of that mattered here. Results were the only currency that counted. Antonio looked satisfied. He assigned my unit directly under his command as 9th Legion Elite Reserves. Detailed battle plans, timing, and coordination with ground and air forces would be worked out by his staff after we'd settled in. Get your supplies and camp assignment from the quartermaster. Rest, familiarize yourselves with the battlefield. War doesn't give you much adjustment time. I saluted and walked out into the blinding sunlight. The camp sprawled before me, vast and restless. Across the river, I could just make out Iron Oak Fortress, a dark shape wrapped in magical shimmer, bristling with defenses, surrounded by the scars of failed assaults. Everything I'd been through since waking up on that horse in the rain had been building to this. The wing burner stood beside me, those golden eyes fixed on the fortress with predatory focus. She ran her tongue over one sharp canine tooth, lips curling into something between a smile and a snarl. Finally, a toy worth playing with. Insect, she murmured, voice husky with anticipation. I hope those dirt-grubbing druids and their mossy stumps last longer than a few minutes. It would be disappointing if they bored me too quickly. I said nothing. My mind was already working through the real challenge. Not the fortress, but the politics. How to deploy a proud, unpredictable dragon ally on an imperial battlefield without losing control of my own destiny. How to earn enough glory to secure my position without getting my irreplaceable knights killed. How to come out of this war stronger than I went in. One more battle, one more step, and then back to Star Knight Domain to build the future I'd promised myself and every knight who followed me. After leaving General Antonio's tent, we were led to our assigned camp, a patch of open ground on the edge of the 9th Legion's sprawling encampment, tucked between other noble private armies and small independent units. Quite enough, at least. Barton already had the knights setting up tents and organizing the area with their usual machine-like efficiency. The dragon blood horses were restless from all the unfamiliar smells and distant battle noise, but the knights calmed them down. I stood at the edge of our camp and stared across the river at Iron Oak Fortress. Even from this distance, I could see its mountainous silhouette and the occasional shimmer of magical defenses flickering over its walls. The weight of what was coming settled on me like a physical thing. This wasn't a skirmish against beast folk or a raid on a tribal camp. This was a siege involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers, a meat grinder of steel, magic, and flesh. Whether my 120 knights would all survive was anyone's guess. Scared, Insect, the wing burner appeared beside me, lazily spinning a blue sapphire she'd acquired from who knows where. Fear doesn't solve anything, I said. I'm figuring out how to keep my people alive. That fortress isn't going to be easy. Humph. Any shell cracks if you burn it long enough. A courier arrived and told me the Legion's quartermaster wanted to see me about equipment for my special companion. Equipment? For the wing burner? Curious, I followed. The supply area was a mountain of war material, grain, arrows, spare weapons, repair parts. But what waited for us in a cleared space was something else entirely. Dozens of massive suits of armor lay arranged on the ground, gleaming silver gray. These were designed for large flying creatures. Huge interlocking plates of Avalon steel inscribed with defensive and magic resistance runes, edged with gold trim and embedded gemstones. They were Griffin armor, the heavy battle suits used by the Stewart family's elite Griffin Knight Corps. Just seeing the size of these plates told me how enormous Griffins really were. Their bodies were bigger than full-grown elephants. Each armor plate needed 2 or 3 strong men to lift. The quartermaster, a scarred old officer with white hair, explained directly. General Antonio had ordered this batch of spare Griffin armor, recovered from fallen mounts, to be adapted for my dragon. Iron Oak Fortress had wall-mounted siege crossbows with bolts as thick as a man's thigh, magically enhanced to punch through heavy steel plate. The druids could also enchant regular arrows with penetration and explosive effects. Even with the wing burner's incredible natural scales, saturated fire from those weapons could cause damage. An extra layer of top-grade armor was basic insurance for a valuable asset. I understood immediately. The Legion saw the wing burner as a reusable biological siege weapon. They wanted to maximize her survivability so she wouldn't go down on the first attack run. Smart, from their perspective. I looked at the wing burner to gauge her reaction. She glanced at the armor with undisguised disgust. You want me to wear dead bird shells? An insult to dragonkind. The quartermaster tried to press the point about the fortress crossbows, but before he could finish, oh? So the esteemed Rian Dort can't even control his own dragon? Needs our Stewart family's dead bird armor to keep it alive? I turned. A group of knights in gleaming white gold armor was approaching, cloaks emblazoned with golden griffins, the Stewart family crest. Leading them was a young man, maybe 21 or 22, tall and lean with an almost unervingly beautiful face, carelessly styled golden hair, and sky-blue eyes that sparkled. With reckless amusement and something that might have been madness. His Griffin Knight armor was practically a work of art, but his helmet hung casually under one arm. Everything about him radiated dangerous charm, the kind of person who'd smile while sliding a knife between your ribs. Viscount Demon, the quartermaster said with a mix of respect and barely hidden headache. Demon. The name clicked in my memory. Demon Stewart, nephew of the Stewart Duke, notorious for wild behavior and extraordinary talent. One of the most prominent young figures in the rival family that had helped destroy House Riendort's political position. His gaze swept over me first, evaluating me like a curiosity in a shop window. Then his eyes locked onto the wing burner behind me with undisguised fascination, not just admiration, but an aggressively invasive interest that made my skin crawl. So you're the Farnell Riendort they threw out to the border. His tone was casually insulting, wrapped in false friendliness. Lucky boy, you actually managed to snag a fairly decent-looking wyvern. He bit down slightly on the word, wyvern, emphasizing the gap between a wyvern and a true dragon. A subtle but deliberate put-down. I stepped forward half a pace, instinctively positioning myself slightly in front of the wing burner. I'm Farnell Riendort. As for my companion, your opinion isn't required. I used companion deliberately, not wyvern or war beast, he laughed lightly and strolled over to the griffin armor, kicking one of the massive chest plates with his polished boot like it was trash. These are quality goods, you know. Avalon steel, top-tier enchantments. Using them on some unknown wyvern feels like a waste, honestly. Before I could respond, he shifted gears with practiced ease. But since General Antonio gave the order, naturally, I have no objections. The words dripped with insincerity. In fact, I've specifically told my boys to leave the noble Riendort Viscount and his precious dragon completely alone. No trouble whatsoever. Then he leaned closer, dropping his voice just enough that everyone nearby could still hear perfectly. Those blue eyes glittered with something between malice and excitement. After all, I'm very curious to see how long your impressive-looking dragon lasts under Iron Oak's Aerostorm, wearing our steward armor. It would be such a shame if it got shot full of holes on the first dive and came tumbling out of the sky. Really, what a tragic scene that would be. His tone was light, almost dreamy, like he was describing a play he couldn't wait to watch, hoping for the dramatic death scene. The air around us went cold. The quartermaster and his workers held their breath. Something hot flared in my chest. I could handle skepticism. I could handle political games. But this, casually fantasizing about my ally's death with a smile, crossed a line. I met his blue eyes with my black ones, keeping my voice level but letting an edge of frost creep in. Viscount Demon is worrying too much. If we're willing to fly into combat, we have our own confidence and means. This armor is just an extra layer of insurance. Though I must say, your level of concern is almost flattering. I didn't flinch, didn't snap back, just returned his provocation with calm certainty and a subtle implication that his concern was inappropriate. He stared at me, searching for cracks, fear, anger, anything he could use. He found nothing but steady resolve. After a few seconds, he burst into louder laughter, though it never reached his eyes. Interesting. Really interesting. Riendorts do have something different about them. He turned and walked away with his griffin knights, that flashy stride saying everything. This is just the beginning. After he left, the quartermaster exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. He quietly explained that Demon Stewart was the Duke's nephew, extraordinarily gifted, and the best Griffin Knight commander on the entire left flank. He'd been first across the river in the initial assault and had actually breached Iron Oak's walls during earlier attacks. Decorated, respected by the generals, but with a personality that was unique. I filed it all away. A talented, well-connected, unpredictable rival from the family that had engineered my exile. Of course he saw me, young, from another great house, arriving with a dragon, as both a curiosity and a threat to his spotlight. His support was really just positioning himself for a front-row seat to watch me fail. No problem, I told the quartermaster. We'll focus on our own business. Then came the harder challenge, convincing the wing burner to actually wear the armor. Her mental voice hit my mind like a slap, dripping with killing intent. That golden-haired insect. I despise him. His eyes made me want to burn him and his noisy birds to ash. I sighed internally and responded through our link. I know, but not now. We need to establish ourselves on this battlefield first. This armor will keep you safer when you're destroying that fortress. Think about it. When you're ripping apart their magic towers and walls right through their arrow storm, imagine what that golden-haired pest's face will look like. Wouldn't that be entertaining? Her golden eyes flickered. That last part seemed to land. She gave a cold snort and didn't refuse outright, though she kept her arms crossed in a stance that clearly said, "If anyone scratches my scales putting that junk on me, I'll end them." That was the best I was going to get. I waved the quartermaster forward to start fitting and adjusting the armor pieces and stood back to think. A fortified nightmare of a fortress ahead. A dangerous, scheming rival watching from the side. A proud dragon who considered wearing armor an insult to her species. And somewhere behind all of it, the Empire pulling strings to use me as the disposable tip of a very expensive spear. This campaign was going to be even more complicated than I'd feared. Getting the wing burner to accept the armor was exactly as difficult as I expected. I pulled her aside and worked every angle I could think of. I told her the armor was beneath her, obviously, like wrapping stars in burlap. But why waste her magnificent scales absorbing mosquito bites when she could let cheap metal do that job? The armor was just a tool to let her focus on what really mattered, the pure joy of destroying everything in her path. She saw right through me, of course. Her mental voice burned into my skull. Clever words, insect. You think I don't know you're just worried about losing your war trophy? I switched tactics and went for her pride. I told her to imagine the scene. Diving through the fortress defenders' heaviest fire, their best weapons bouncing off her harmlessly, turning their magic towers and walls into rubble while they watched in absolute disbelief. Wouldn't that look of total despair on their faces be more satisfying than just tanking hits with bare scales? And wouldn't a certain golden-haired Stuart pest be especially fun to humiliate? That landed. Her golden eyes flickered with something hungry. Once, she snapped mentally. This one time. If these iron shells slow me down or feel uncomfortable, I'll melt them, and all of you, into slag. Good enough. She stepped into the open area and transformed. The dark red light surged, space warped, and suddenly her human form was gone, replaced by the full nightmare. 160 meters of black-scaled dragon. 348 meters of wingspan. She didn't even roar on purpose. Just the natural sound of her existing at full-size hit like a physical force, shaking the ground. Her shadow swallowed half the supply area, turning daylight to twilight. Each scale was shield-sized, edged with glowing red lava lines. Those crown-like horns stabbed toward the sky. The dragon aura that poured off her was so intense that nearby soldiers collapsed unconscious, eyes rolling back, foaming at the mouth. Others froze in place, legs locked, souls trembling under the weight of something their bodies recognized as an apex predator beyond all comprehension. The quartermaster's voice cracked into a sobbing shout. Start. Now. Move. Workers and engineers fought through soul-crushing terror, hauling armor plates toward her with cranes and sheer manpower, trying to fit pieces that had looked enormous on the ground but now seemed like postage stamps against her body. Then the real chaos hit. The Stuart family's griffin camp exploded. Dozens of the most powerful griffins, magical creatures in their own right, with their own pride and territorial instincts, sensed the dragon aura as a direct challenge to their existence. They went berserk. Piercing shrieks tore through the air. Several pure white griffins erupted in blazing holy light, burning like miniature suns. Others crackled with golden lightning that wove into deadly nets around their bodies. More charged up compressed magic blasts that warped the air with raw energy. And these weren't isolated. The griffins' magic resonated with each other, amplifying, the holy light solidifying, the lightning thickening, the energy attacks jumping up an entire power tier. They broke free from their handlers and charged the wing burner in a wave of light and fury, determined to defend their claim as rulers of the sky. The wing burner, already irritated beyond measure by the armor-fitting process, saw these feathered mutts not only approaching but actually daring to bear their claws and magic at her. Her rage went nuclear. Her roar this time wasn't a warning. It was a death sentence. Visible dark red shock waves blasted outward, shredding the nearest scaffolding into splinters. Soldiers were knocked flat in rows, bleeding from ears and noses. Her throat lit up, not the slow gathering of energy I'd seen before, but a volcanic eruption building to critical mass. The air around her neck ionized and crackled with explosive detonations. Space itself warped from the heat, and the dragon breath hadn't even fired yet. Just the buildup was enough to freeze every soul in the area. No, stop. Listen to me, I screamed through our mental link with every shred of spiritual force I possessed. My vision was going white from the effort. They're stupid animals. They don't have your intelligence. They're just panicking. But if you breathe fire here, we become enemies of the entire army. The stewards will go insane. Everything we've planned is finished. Is it worth it for a few brainless birds? Think about Iron Oak Fortress. That's where you unleash everything. On the other side, Demon Steward had finally stopped smirking. His face went dark and he was shouting orders at his riders to pull the griffins back. For the first time, his blue eyes showed something other than amusement, genuine alarm. He hadn't expected this level of raw destructive potential. The strongest griffin riders launched themselves into the air, fighting to override their mounts' battle instincts with trained commands and willpower. Holy light, lightning, and magic blasts flickered and dimmed as handlers wrestled control back. And at the same time, my desperate mental shouting, combined with the Wingburner's own sliver of remaining rationality, fought against the inferno building in her throat. Time stopped. Every second stretched to eternity. Then, reluctantly, furiously, the dark red glow in her throat stuttered, flared, and slowly died back down, like a flood being forced behind a dam. She let out a suppressed snarl of pure, frustrated violence, golden eyes still blazing with unspent rage. But she held. The griffins were dragged away by their riders, screeching in protest. The near catastrophe that would have turned half the camp into a crater was averted by the thinnest possible margin. The area looked like a storm had hit it. I was drenched in cold sweat, legs barely holding me up. I sent a weak pulse of gratitude through the link. Her response was a blast of raw irritation that nearly gave me a headache, but she didn't move again. The quartermaster collapsed to the ground, gasping, then somehow pulled himself together and got his shell-shocked workers back to the installation. In the distance, I saw a demon watching the partially armored dragon with an expression that had nothing to do with fear. His eyes burned with jealousy, competitive hunger, and something darker. He licked his dry lips and muttered something I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. I could guess. He wanted what I had, or he wanted to prove he was better than it. Eventually, after what felt like hours of nerve-shredding work, the last piece of modified Avalon steel was locked into place with heavy mithril-laced chains across the Wingburner's spine. The workers practically fled the moment the final clasp clicked shut. She looked terrifying with the armor on. Silver-gray steel plates covered her chest, belly, neck base, and parts of her back, contrasting sharply with her black scales. The defensive runes on the metal glowed faintly, interweaving with the red lava patterns under her scales. She looked less like a dragon wearing protection and more like a living siege engine built for total war. She did not appreciate the aesthetic. Without a sound, without acknowledging anyone, she folded her enormous wings around her body like closing doors, tucked her massive head underneath, and curled into a mountain-sized ball of black scales and silver armor plates. Then she went asleep, right there, in the middle of the supply depot. Or rather, she went on strike. A sulking, passive-aggressive protest in the form of a dragon-shaped hill blocking half the quartermaster's logistics operations. Her breathing rumbled like an industrial fan, each exhale releasing a wave of sulfur-scented heat. The dragon aura, while dimmed, still hung over the area like an invisible weight, keeping everyone on edge. The quartermaster crept over to me, face crumpled in despair. "Viscount, sir. Could your companion, perhaps, move? Even just a little? The supply wagons can't get through. The war golem repair parts are stuck. If General Antonio finds out, I tried the mental link. Could you maybe sleep somewhere else? You're blocking traffic." The response hit me like a slap. "Go away. Say one more word and I melt you and these iron shells into liquid." The hill shuddered irritably, making the ground tremble. I looked at the quartermaster and spread my hands with a helpless shrug. "You saw that. There's nothing I can do. She's in a bad mood. If the general asks, tell him my dragon is resting here temporarily, and I'll take responsibility for the disruption." The quartermaster looked at me, looked at the immovable dragon mountain radiating, "Touch me and die," energy, and let out the most defeated sigh I'd ever heard. What was he going to do? Go poke her awake and ask her to scoot over? He didn't have that kind of courage. Nobody did. And so the 9th Legion Supply Depot gained a new landmark. One extremely large blackened silver metallic hill parked stubbornly in the center of operations, forcing every person, cart, and horse to detour around it. Inside, the world's most dangerous creature slept soundly, heavy breathing and sulfur fumes the only proof this wasn't just an oddly shaped rock formation. I walked away shaking my head. I had planning to do with Barton, battle tactics, coordination with the Legion, how to actually execute the fortress assault with a dragon ally who was currently throwing a tantrum about wearing Deadbird hand-me-downs. But I wasn't truly worried. When the time came to burn, destroy, and demonstrate absolute power, the Wingburner wouldn't hold back. Destruction was in her blood. Right now she just needed to stew in her annoyance for a while. I let her sleep it off. The real war was still ahead. I went back to our camp after the dragon armor disaster. Barton had everything set up, tents, horse pens, guard rotations, all running smoothly. I filled him in on what happened at the supply depot, including the Wingburner's current status as an immovable, sulking mountain blocking half the logistics area. Barton gave me that long-suffering look and said her temper was truly exceptional. Then he got serious and asked about our specific mission. I spread out the tactical map on the table and pointed at Iron Oak Fortress. The army wanted the Wingburner to be the battering ram that cracked their defenses open. That much was clear from General Antonio. But before the formal orders arrived, I needed Barton to tell me everything he knew about the fortress. What he described was terrifying. Iron Oak Fortress wasn't a castle, it was a weaponized mountain. The Druna had built around a lone peak called Iron Oak Ridge, wrapping it in a 60-meter-high outer wall with a 40-meter-thick base made from granite, mixed with iron ore and reinforced with druid-treated ironwood cores. Behind that wall were 2 more concentric walls stepping up the mountainside, creating layered defensive platforms. The entire mountain was honeycombed with catapult positions, crossbow platforms, magic tower foundations, supply caves, and barracks. Even if you broke through the outer wall, you'd face brutal room-to-room, cave-to-cave fighting all the way up. The garrison was nearly 100,000 strong, regular Druna troops and forest guards, not counting the druids and their summoned creatures. If the attackers let up pressure, the defenders could actually counterattack. The defensive weapons were nightmarish. At least 17 magic towers dotted the walls and mountainside, linked together in a combined barrier that could project a massive protective shield over most of the fortress. These towers also served as long-range magical artillery, firestorms, chain lightning, curses, weakening spells. Thousands of heavy crossbows and catapults covered every approach. The crossbow bolts were enchanted and thick enough to threaten war golems. The catapults hurled giant rocks, burning barrels, and druid-made nature bombs, packed with thorny seeds or corrosive spores. Then came the druids themselves. They healed defenders, strengthened troops, and summoned war treants, living plant constructs that could move, fight, entangle siege equipment, and even repair damaged walls. They controlled a menagerie of magical beasts, giant burrowing worms that could undermine foundations, flying acid-spitting moths, blood-drinking bat creatures, shadow leopards, and dire wolves. All fearless, all vicious. And somewhere inside were war trees, the druid equivalent of war golems, more flexible and able to interact with the forest environment. They'd already cost the Empire several of its own stone giants. Just as Barton finished his briefing, a courier arrived with General Antonio's formal battle orders. I read them quickly. Tomorrow at dawn, the moment sunlight hit the battlefield, every heavy weapon on the western, southern, and northern approaches would unleash maximum firepower at the fortress. Shield, all catapults, crossbows, mage battalions, and the remaining 31 war golems firing simultaneously. The goal was to overload the magical barrier and force it into a transition state. Intelligence from prisoners indicated that when the shield was pushed to maximum load, it developed brief gaps, sometimes minutes, sometimes longer, where sections would flicker and fail. My job was to be airborne before the bombardment started, waiting in safe airspace. The instant the shield showed instability, dimming, flickering, partial collapse, the Wingburner had to punch through immediately. Priority targets. Destroy at least 5 magic towers to permanently cripple the shield network. Secondary targets. Clear heavy weapons from the walls and cause maximum chaos among the beast swarms. The Stuart Griffin Knights and Pegasus Riders would fly simultaneously, tasked with protecting the wing burner by engaging flying beasts and suppressing anti-air fire from the walls. The orders specifically emphasized coordination with Demon Stuart's unit, who would cover the wing burner's flanking approach. The final line was pure Antonio. This battle hinges on your ability to seize the moment and shatter the shield. The Empire's honor rests on this strike. Barton voiced what I was already thinking. The mission was incredibly dangerous, and coordination with Demon Stuart after today's near catastrophe was a serious concern. I told him I'd handle Demon personally. Whatever happened between our families, whatever games he played, a man who led charges from the front and earned his war record through actual combat probably valued honor enough not to sabotage an ally in battle. Probably. Barton didn't look convinced, but accepted it. I told him to keep the knights on highest alert and ready for anything, then walked out alone toward the Stuart camp. Their section of the base was everything ours wasn't. Prime location on high ground, lavish tents, gleaming white gold armor everywhere, griffin cries echoing across the area. The guards looked at my black re-endured armor like I was something stuck to their boot. When I asked to see Demon, a knight gave me a contemptuous once-over and told me to wait outside. I stood there, perfectly still, listening to their not-so-quiet commentary. His damn dragon almost killed our partners today. Re-endured Castoff gets lucky with a wyvern and thinks he's our equal. Tomorrow we'll see who covers who. I ignored all of it and studied their griffins instead. Magnificent creatures, huge, sharp-eyed, radiating magical power. The pride of House Stuart, and for good reason. Eventually the guard came back and let me in, still radiating hostility. I was led through increasingly luxurious tent rows to Demon's personal quarters. His tent was practically a noble's parlor. Thick beast-hide carpets, fine furniture, even a small bar with wine bottles. Demon lounged in a padded chair wearing a casual white silk shirt, collar open, holding a glass of amber wine. All the battlefield intensity from earlier was gone, replaced by that lazy, dangerous charm. Well, what brings the noble re-endured Viscount to my humble abode? He gestured at the opulent surroundings while calling them humble, without a trace of irony. I skipped the games. You know why I'm here. Orders are in. Tomorrow we need to work together. He raised an eyebrow at my directness, then had a servant offer me wine. I declined, business only. He shrugged and took another sip, studying me over the rim of his glass with those piercing blue eyes. I've seen the orders. Relax, Viscount. My reputation might be questionable, but I know the difference between games and duty. Between personal amusement and, he paused on the word, glory. Then he leaned forward, dropping the playful mask. I know what you're afraid of. That I'll hold a grudge about today and sabotage you tomorrow. Or that my riders will drag their feet on the escort because of what happened with the griffins. I said nothing, which confirmed it. He snorted. You think too little of the Stuarts. And of me. Private competition is one thing. The battlefield is another. I'm counting on your big lizard to crack that turtle shell so my boys and I can charge in and collect heads in glory. Why would I sabotage that? His words were blunt and self-interested, but that honesty was actually reassuring. I give you my word, he said, voice turning formal. Tomorrow, my Griffin Knights will execute the mission exactly as ordered. We'll clear flying beasts from your dragon's approach corridor and suppress the wall crossbows. This is for the Empire's victory and for my war record. Backstabbing is beneath me. His blue eyes held steady, sharp, proud, and for once completely serious. I believed him, not because he was noble or kind, but because his motivations were transparent. He wanted glory, and he needed the wing burner to succeed to get it. Then I'm satisfied, I said. Looking forward to fighting alongside you tomorrow. I turned to leave, but Demon called out one last time, his grin returning with full competitive fire. Now that business is done, how about something personal? Tomorrow, let's see who kills more Druna scum, who destroys more defenses. Your dragon is big, sure, but my griffins and I aren't exactly pushovers. What do you say? Dare to make it a contest. The challenge was almost childish, but underneath the bravado, I caught something real. This wasn't political scheming. It was a warrior's need to measure himself against another warrior. Demon didn't care about family names or political scores. He cared about being the best, and he wanted to see if I was worth competing with. I tapped the dragon crest on my chest and allowed myself a faint smile. Why not? Tomorrow on the battlefield, may the best man win. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard him drain his glass and chuckle to himself. May the best man win. Heh, this is going to be fun. I headed back to camp through the fading light, mind already turning to the real challenge. Tomorrow morning, I need to wake up. A sulking dragon, fly her into the most heavily defended fortress I'd ever seen, and destroy 5 magic towers while thousands of weapons tried to shoot us out of the sky. But at least I wouldn't have to worry about getting stabbed in the back by my own side. That was one variable eliminated. Now I just needed to figure out how to tell the wing burner she'd be working alongside the feathered mutts she'd almost incinerated this afternoon. I didn't witness what happened at Weeping Blood Valley myself. I learned the details later, pieced together from camp rumors, official reports, and the gruesome trophy the Imperial Vanguard paraded on their flagpole. 80 miles southwest of Iron Oak Fortress, the last Free Druna Field army met its end. About 300 men, all that remained of 12,000 elite, antler, cavalry under Duke Stephen Stannis, the Druna King's own brother. What Stannis had done before that final stand was actually remarkable. When the Imperial forces smashed through the Druna Western Front and sent their armies reeling, most commanders retreated toward the border fortresses. Not Stannis. He took his 12,000 cavalry and did something insane. He forced them through a mountain pass called Ghost Shadow Gap that every military map labeled as impassable. Nearly 1,000 men fell to their deaths on the cliffs. The survivors came pouring out behind the Imperial advance like a knife in the back. They burned supply trains, wrecked siege equipment, killed senior officers, and nearly overran an Imperial Count's command post. The chaos they caused forced the entire Imperial Eastern campaign to halt its pursuit and redirect forces to deal with the threat. Those few days of breathing room were exactly what the broken Druna main army needed to reach Iron Oak Fortress, Grey Rock Fortress, and Wind Whisper Fortress, the 3 border strongholds that now formed their last defensive line. It was a textbook sacrifice play, and it saved the Druna Kingdom from total collapse. But it left Stannis and his men stranded deep behind enemy lines, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Imperial troops. They fought for days, trying to break through to the fortresses. Every attempt was crushed. 12,000 became 300. Horses died or were butchered for food. Supplies ran out completely. Then came the final message from his king, carried by the last royal hawk. The letter praised his courage, acknowledged his sacrifice, and then delivered the real news. The kingdom was falling apart on every front. Demons attacking from the north, beastmen raiding from the east, southern nobles in open rebellion over taxes and conscription. The treasury was empty. No relief army was coming. The crown had authorized secret peace negotiations with the empire. The letter ended with 4 words. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. The polite way of saying, you're on your own, and we both know what that means. Stannis understood perfectly. He was a political man as well as a soldier. Surrendering might save his 300 men, but a captured royal prince would weaken the kingdom's negotiating position, give his brother's enemies ammunition at home, and stain the Stannis name forever. His death, on the other hand, would make him a martyr, a symbol of Druna's fighting spirit that could rally the people and maybe squeeze a little more dignity out of the peace talks. He was a discarded piece on the board. His last value was in how he died. When the Imperial heavy cavalry appeared on the horizon, closing in from 3 directions with mechanical precision, Stannis made his choice. He looked at each of his remaining soldiers, young faces, exhausted, wounded, but still willing to follow him anywhere. He put his hand on his family sword with the stag crest on its pommel, whispered something nobody could hear, and then raised his blade toward the advancing wall of Imperial steel. For Druna, 300 voices answered. 300 broken weapons rose. They charged straight into the Imperial cavalry like moths into a furnace. There was no miracle. One charge was all it took to end them. What the Empire did afterward was the part that made my stomach turn when I heard about it. They cut off Stannis' head. Then they sewed a female deer's head onto his headless body and hung the grotesque thing from the Vanguard Army's flagpole. A deliberate, calculated humiliation, mocking the stag duke, desecrating his corpse to break Druna morale. I stared at the distant flagpole when I first spotted it from our camp, trying to make out the shape hanging from it. When someone told me what it was, I said nothing. But I thought about it for a long time. A man who saved his entire kingdom with one desperate gamble, abandoned by that same kingdom when he needed them most, choosing death over surrender because even his dying had political value to the people who'd thrown him away. A discarded piece. Just like me. The difference was, I intended to survive long enough to stop being one. I barely slept. The battle plan ran through my head all night. Timing, targets, coordination with the Griffin riders, everything that could go wrong. When I finally gave up on rest and stepped outside, the pre-dawn air hit me like a slap of cold water. Barton was already waiting. The knights were feeding the horses, checking gear, moving with that quiet intensity that comes before a fight. He told me to be careful. I could see the worry he was trying to hide. Today wasn't about our ground forces. Today was about me, the wing-burner, and whether we could trust our so-called allies in the sky. I nodded and turned toward the supply depot where my dragon was still sleeping, but something at the camp's front gate caught my eye and stopped me cold. On the slope facing Iron Oak Fortress, the Empire had planted a forest of freshly cut wooden poles. Each one had bodies impaled on top, hundreds of them, all wearing Druna armor. They hung in twisted, agonized positions, some faceless from damage, others staring with dead eyes toward their own fortress. The stench of blood and early decay carried on the morning breeze, even from this distance. Imperial soldiers patrolled the area without a second glance. Standard psychological warfare. Display enemy corpses to crush the defenders will to fight. I'd read about things like this in my old world's history books. Seeing it in person made my stomach heave. Then I saw the centerpiece, and the cold really hit me. In the middle of the corpse forest, one pole stood taller and thicker than the rest. A headless body hung from it, wearing a battle robe that had once been magnificent. You could still see the stag emblem of the Stannis royal family despite the filth. Where the head should have been, Imperial soldiers had sewn on the head of a female deer. The doe's eyes were frozen wide in death terror, attached to a man's proud warrior body. Below it dangled a tattered dark green Druna royal stag banner, fluttering weakly like a funeral streamer. I asked a nearby soldier who it was. Duke Stephen Stannis, the Druna king's brother. A royal duke. A man who'd saved his entire kingdom with a suicide charge behind enemy lines, buying time for the retreating armies to reach the fortresses. And this was how they treated his body after he fell. Sewed an animal's head onto his corpse and hung him up like a trophy. A chill ran up my spine. If this was what happened to a prince of the blood when he lost, what would happen to someone like me? An exile with no family protection, no political allies, no safety net? If I ever ended up on the wrong side of a defeat, my end could be even uglier. I understood the Empire's logic. This wasn't just about demoralizing Iron Oak's garrison. It was a message to everyone. Resist the Empire, and we'll destroy you, body, honor, and legacy. But I also knew this kind of cruelty was a double-edged blade. Some defenders would see this and break. Others would see their beloved duke's desecrated corpse and fight with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Killing was one thing. I'd accepted that. But mutilating and humiliating the dead, that crossed a line I wouldn't cross myself. From across the camp, Demon Stewart glanced at the corpse forest with casual contempt. Almost a smirk. Defeated enemies deserved what they got, in his world. Then he spotted me, made a throat-cutting gesture across the distance, and pointed at Iron Oak Fortress. Pure competitive fire in those blue eyes. I didn't respond. We were different people with different limits. Let's go, Barton, I said quietly. Time to wake up our friend. I walked to the supply depot. The wing-burner's mountain-sized form was still curled up under her wings, breathing steadily, the faint shimmer of Avalon steel armor visible on her flanks. Her dragon aura pushed everyone away like an invisible force field. I reached out through our mental link, keeping my tone calm. Wingburner, time to wake up. The sun's about to rise. The fortress is waiting. The people who wanted to see us fail are watching. Silence. Then a blast of irritation slammed back through the connection like a hot wind. Shut up, insect. The mountain trembled. Wings loosened. That enormous head rose from beneath them, molten gold eyes locking onto me with murderous morning grumpiness. Her throat rumbled with a threatening growl. "Give me one reason not to burn you to ash for waking me." I pointed at Iron Oak Fortress. "That's the reason. That castle and every creature inside it that dares challenge your power. The owners of those noisy birds from yesterday are waiting to watch us humiliate ourselves. It's time to show them who truly owns the sky, and whose fire turns their shell and their pride to dust." I aimed straight at what mattered to her: dominance, dignity, destruction. Her golden eyes narrowed and followed my gesture toward the fortress. Her nostrils flared, catching the distant sense of magic, natural power, and thousands of living targets. Yesterday's frustration and this morning's rudeness combined into a focused predatory hunger. A low growl vibrated through her entire body, not anger this time, but anticipation. "Fine, let's crush them." Her wings unfolded. 348 meters of shadow rolled across the camp like an eclipse. Griffins in the distance screeched nervously. I scrambled up the armor plating at the base of her wing, using scales and steel edges as handholds, until I reached the wide, flat area at the base of her neck. My riding position, braced between natural spine ridges and bolted armor plates. I looked down at the camp shrinking below me. The corpse forest. The assembling Imperial army. Iron Oak Fortress squatting on the horizon like a steel-bristled monster. Dawn light broke through the clouds, illuminating the wing-burner's armored body. Black scales, silver steel, red lava veins glowing underneath. A vision of the apocalypse, airborne and hungry. Across the sky, Demon was already up on his griffin, formation building around him. He saw me standing on the dragon's neck and shot me one last look. Competitive, eager, alive with battle lust. The war machine was grinding into motion, and we were about to become its sharpest, most dangerous edge. I gripped the scale ridge under my hand and felt the volcanic power thrumming through the creature beneath me. Then I fixed my eyes on Iron Oak Fortress and waited for the sun to rise. The battle began at dawn. First came the slave soldiers, thousands of them, ragged and hollow-eyed, driven forward by whips and crossbows aimed at their backs. Their job was simple and horrible: absorb arrows, fill trenches, and die so the real attack could follow. The war drums pounded, and they surged toward Iron Oak Fortress in a chaotic wave. The walls stayed silent until they were in range, then erupted with death. Arrows fell like swarms of locusts. Siege crossbow bolts the size of spears punched through shields and bodies. Rolling logs and boulders crashed down the wall slopes, carving bloody gaps in the human tide. Hundreds died every minute. Life became worthless. While the meat shield absorbed fire, the Imperial heavy weapons opened up from 3 directions simultaneously. Thousands of catapults and crossbows launched a storm of enchanted projectiles trailing magical fire. 31 war golems stomped forward, their massive single eyes blasting concentrated energy beams at the fortress walls. The bombardment was staggering, a continuous rain of destruction aimed at one goal: overloading the magic shield. Iron Oak's 17 magic towers blazed to life, channeling energy through an invisible network to maintain the protective barrier. The shield rippled and flashed under the assault, but held firm. I crouched low on the wingburner's neck, watching, waiting. "Hold. Not yet," I told her and myself. The bombardment didn't stop. Wave after wave of fire, stone, and magical energy slammed into the barrier. The mage corps chanted in unison, their combined power stirring the clouds into massive spirals. Meteor showers of magical fire hammered the shield relentlessly. Then I heard it, a strange groaning sound, like glass about to shatter. The shield began warping violently, rippling like disturbed water. On the north side, a section of the barrier flickered, dimmed, and vanished entirely. The window was open. The wingburner didn't wait for my command. She roared, a sound that carried the weight of something ancient and absolute, shaking the air itself into visible ripples. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. War beasts on the walls panicked. Shadow leopards cowered. Thorn giants froze. Flying serpents tumbled out of the sky, swatted down by invisible force. Dragon aura crushed lesser creatures by instinct. She launched, wings thundering, body hurtling toward the fortress like a black missile. The speed was terrifying, far beyond any normal flying creature. Demon Steward and his Griffin Knights surged up simultaneously from the flanks, white-gold lightning streaking across the sky. Charge! I heard him roar, leading the pack toward the wall-mounted crossbows that were swinging to target us. The defenders reacted fast. Aim for the dragon. Fire! Officers screamed on the walls. Arrows and enchanted bolts filled the air like horizontal rain. Druid-controlled flying beasts, vampire bats, shrieking serpents, forest eagles, charged at us despite the lingering dragon aura, driven by magical compulsion to attack even through their terror. The wing-burner didn't need my guidance for combat. She barrel-rolled to dodge a siege crossbow bolt thick as a flagpole, and her left wing swept through a row of crossbow platforms like a war hammer, smashing them to splinters along with their crews. Left side. The magic tower. Take it out, I shouted, spotting a tower whose light was pulsing rapidly, trying to recharge and stabilize the shield. She swung her head toward it. Dark red light gathered in her throat. The dragon breath hit like a flood of liquid destruction, swallowing the tower's upper half. Stone melted like wax. The stored magical energy inside detonated in a chain of explosions that turned the surrounding wall section into an inferno. First tower down. I counted silently, feeling the wing-burner's excitement vibrating through her scales. But the defenders kept fighting. Druid-enhanced serpents spat acid and poison spines at us from the flanks. Demon's Griffin Knights tangled with them in vicious aerial combat. I saw Demon's golden lance shear through a serpent's wing, but a vampire bat raked sparks across his shoulder plate in the same moment. Despite his usual arrogance, he held his position perfectly, shielding the wing-burner's left side and absorbing the brunt of the flying beast harassment. Ignore the animals. Keep hitting the towers, he yelled at me across the wind, and I had to admit, the man backed up his promises. The wing-burner locked onto a bigger target, a heavily protected tower on the inner wall that appeared to be a regional shield hub. She dove straight at it, ignoring the arrows bouncing off her scales and armor like hail on a tin roof. Several enchanted siege bolts screamed past. One caught the edge of her left wing membrane, tearing a small hole. She snarled with irritation but didn't slow. Watch out. Heavy crossbows. I saw a battery of siege weapons on the inner wall, tracking our dive path. Imperial Pegasus Knights swooped from above just in time, dropping alchemical bombs and blinding flash spells that disrupted the crossbow crews. The wing-burner's second breath attack was different. She whipped it like a flaming lash, sweeping across the main tower's base and carrying through into a smaller auxiliary tower beside it. Both towers collapsed in earth-shaking explosions, shooting debris clouds into the sky. The shield over that entire section died completely, its light guttering out like a snuffed candle. 3 towers destroyed. The fortress's magical defense network was crippling. Then everything went wrong. In the chaos, I didn't see it coming. Nobody did. In a separate defense tower on the midsection of the north wall, a Druna officer named Adrian, I learned his name later, had been waiting with cold patience through the entire assault. He commanded a weapon called a Fortress Breaker, a tower-sized super crossbow that took 20 men to operate. The bolt was over 10 meters long, forged from the finest steel, fitted with barbed armor-piercing tips and triple blood channels, inscribed with glowing green, armor shatter, and wither runes, built specifically to kill giants and war golems. He waited for his moment. After the wing-burner destroyed the 3rd tower, she paused for a fraction of a second, adjusting her flight angle, slightly slowed from the energy expenditure. Her right leg and the wing root area were briefly exposed to his firing arc. He pulled the trigger. The sound was like a giant's heartbeat, a single deep boom that momentarily silenced everything else on the battlefield. The bolt became a green streak of death, crossing the distance faster than my eyes could track. The wing-burner sensed it and tried to dodge. She was fast, but the bolt was faster and her body was enormous. It didn't hit the leg dead center. It grazed the inner thigh, scraping along the gap between dragon scale and Avalon steel armor. Even a graze from that weapon was catastrophic. The barbed tip and blood channels ripped open a wound dozens of meters long, cutting deep enough to expose bone. Dark red dragon blood cascaded from the sky like a waterfall, hissing and smoking where it hit the burning walls below. The wither enchantment on the bolt spread immediately, Scales around the wound dulled and turned gray, flesh taking on a sickly, decayed color. The wingburner screamed, not the proud roar of destruction, a howl of genuine pain and fury. Her entire body seized up in midair, flight path lurching violently. She dropped altitude hard, staggering like a wounded bird. I nearly flew off her neck. I grabbed the saddle straps and hung on as the world tilted crazily beneath me. Looking back, I saw the wound, a horrifying gash pouring blood, edged with the gray-green taint of wither magic. "Are you okay?" I shouted. "Shut up, insect." "I'm fine." Her mental voice was raw with pain and rage, but the injury was clearly affecting her badly. Her golden eyes locked onto the source, that tower, already reloading a second bolt. For one instant, I felt the connection between her gaze and the cold gray eyes of the officer inside. "You dare wound me?" She went berserk. Ignoring every other threat, she turned her full attention on that tower and unleashed the most concentrated, most devastating breath attack I'd ever seen. Not dark red this time. Searing white, so intense the air around it simply ceased to exist. The tower didn't explode. It evaporated. Granite, steel, humans, the precious siege crossbow. Everything was annihilated in a fraction of a second. Not even rubble remained. Just a glowing, glass-smooth crater in the ground, smoking. But that attack cost her. The combination of the wound, the wither magic spreading through her flesh, and the massive energy expenditure of that white-hot breath left her visibly weakened. She let out a sound I'd never heard from her before, something close to exhaustion. "We have to get out of here. Now," I yelled. "Shut up." I know. Pain and fury and stubborn pride all fighting in her voice. I'm not dead yet. But as we tried to climb away from the walls, more threats emerged. Another fortress breaker was being wheeled into position in a different tower. War trance. Massive living trees animated by druid death magic erupted from the inner city streets, hurling sharpened wooden spears the size of battering rams at us with supernatural force. "Right side. Dodge," I screamed. She twisted. Most of the spears missed, but one scraped across her belly armor, leaving a deep gouge in the Avalon steel. The evasion tore at her wound again, drawing another suppressed howl of pain. Our flight path wobbled dangerously. Then Demon came through. His voice cut across the battlefield like a war horn. "Knights, with me. Suppress those towers. Clear those damn trees." He didn't hesitate for a second. He personally led his elite Griffin squad in a diving attack on the tower with the second fortress breaker, golden battle aura blazing around him, lance carving, through intercepting serpents and bats. Another squad of Pegasus riders dove toward the war trance, hurling alchemical fire bombs and driving enchanted lances into their wooden bodies. Under their desperate covering action, the wingburner beat her massive wings through waves of agony, dragging her bleeding, poisoned body higher, clawing for altitude. Every wing beat sent shudders of pain through her frame. Dragon blood rained down from the sky, painting dark trails across the scorched earth below. I pressed flat against her neck, feeling every tremor, watching the wither magic creep outward from the wound, scales going gray, muscle turning the color of ash. "We need to get back to friendly lines," I shouted again. I said I know. She was furious, hurt, and too proud to admit how bad it was. "I'm not dying to some insect's toy." Behind us, Demon and the air cavalry fought a savage rearguard action, holding back the swarms of flying beasts and keeping the remaining siege weapons busy while we limped towards safety. 3 magic towers destroyed. The fortress shield was broken. The mission was technically a success, but the price was a wounded dragon trailing blood across the sky, wither poison eating into her flesh, and a battle that was far from over. With Demon and the air cavalry covering our retreat, the wingburner barely made it back to friendly airspace. Every wing beat was agony for her. The massive wound on her right leg kept tearing open, pouring dragon blood mixed with the sickly green glow of wither magic. She flew crooked, losing altitude, gaining it back, lurching like a ship in a storm. I pressed flat against her neck, feeling her life force draining with every drop of blood that fell. When we finally reached our camp, she crashed more than landed. The impact shook the ground and sent up a cloud of dust. She collapsed flat, breathing in ragged, painful gasps like a broken bellows. Her golden eyes were half shut, all the arrogance and fire dimmed to exhaustion. The wound was horrifying up close. Exposed muscle and bone running from her inner thigh to her wing root, the edges crawling with green wither energy that was actively fighting her body's attempt to heal. A pool of corrosive dragon blood spread beneath her like a toxic swamp. Barton was already there with a squad of knights. His face went pale when he saw the damage. I slid off her neck, barely keeping my feet, and started shouting for the army's best healers and priests. But the wingburner stopped me cold. Her mental voice was weak but absolutely firm. Get away, insect. Those lesser creatures' magic is useless. It'll only interfere. Don't let anything near me. I understood. Dragon healing worked differently. Some ancient biological magic tied to their bloodline. Human healing spells might clash with it, make things worse. She needed time, safety, and nothing else. I turned to Barton and gave the hardest order of the day. Full lockdown. Every knight deployed in a defensive ring around the wingburner. Anyone who came within 100 meters without my permission, Imperial soldier, officer, anyone, was to be treated as hostile. Lethal force authorized. The camp transformed in seconds. Barricades went up. Black armored knights on dragon blood horses formed a moving perimeter, eyes scanning every direction with killing intent. This wasn't about the enemy anymore. I was protecting a wounded dragon from our own allies, from anyone who might see this as an opportunity. A faint dark red glow began spreading across the wingburner's body, concentrating around the wound. Her damaged scales pulsed with light like flowing lava, her own healing magic activating, fighting the wither curse. It would take time. How much, I didn't know. I stood guard beside her massive head, hand on my sword, and waited. Meanwhile, the battle I'd helped start was tearing Iron Oak Fortress apart. The wingburner had destroyed 9 magic towers before she went down, nearly half the shield network's core nodes. Without them, the fortress's combined magical barrier collapsed completely. Only a tiny, flickering remnant held over the mountaintop citadel, barely functional. With the shield gone, every Imperial heavy weapon opened up without restraint. Catapults, siege crossbows, war golems, mage battalions, all pouring fire into the exposed fortress from 3 directions simultaneously. The bombardment was apocalyptic. Buildings crumbled, towers shattered, firestorms swept through streets. Chain lightning detonated in clusters of defenders. General Antonio's voice boomed across the battlefield through magical amplification. The shield is broken. For the Empire's glory, attack. The response was a roar from hundreds of thousands of throats. The Imperial army surged forward like a flood through every breach and gap. The holes the wingburner had burned, the sections the bombardment had crumbled. Regular army, noble private forces, everyone charging at once. What followed was the most savage fighting imaginable. At the largest breach in the north wall, the one the wingburner's breath and Imperial catapults had blown wide open, the battle became a pure, grinding machine. Imperial heavy infantry locked their massive tower shields together into a moving steel wall, pushing forward step by step into the gap. Long spears stabbed out between the shields like venomous snakes, drawing blood with every thrust. Facing them were Drunna's elite forest guard heavy infantry in dark green scale armor, wielding thick round shields and heavy war axes. They smashed against the Imperial shield wall again and again like ocean waves hitting a dam. Both sides fought with mechanical brutality. Front rank soldiers fell, and rear ranks immediately stepped onto the still warm bodies to take their place. The ground beneath their feet wasn't ground anymore. It was a carpet of corpses, broken shields, shattered weapons, and sticky blood. The stench was beyond description. Men fought with dead eyes, stabbing automatically, pushing forward until they themselves were killed by something they never saw coming. On the walls, the fighting was chaos. Small groups clashed in narrow spaces where formations couldn't hold. I heard later about a young Imperial soldier named Carl who nearly died when a Drunna magic swordsman cut through 5 of his squad mates like they were paper. The swordsman moved like a ghost, his enchanted rapier punching through armor effortlessly. Carl froze with terror, raised a useless guard, and would have died if his veteran squad leader hadn't body-checked the swordsman at the last second, taking a slash to the arm to buy Carl a heartbeat of survival. Inside the city, the fighting turned into a nightmare of room-by-room clearing. Every house, workshop, and cellar could hide enemies. In one blacksmith shop, Imperial Knights kicked down the door and were immediately hit with poisoned crossbow bolts from the shadows and thorny vines that erupted from the floor, a druid and forest rangers ambushing together. One knight was entangled and poisoned before he could react. The squad leader made a split-second call, ordered suppressive fire on the rangers, and personally led 2 knights in a straight charge through the clawing vines to reach the druid. A war axe split the druid's staff and chest in one swing. The vines withered instantly. The surviving rangers were cut down in the confined space. In a dead-end alley, a group of Imperial noble private soldiers cornered wounded Druna troops and civilians. Instead of taking prisoners, the soldiers started looting corpses and eyeing a young woman among the survivors. A one-armed Druna veteran stood between them with a chipped sword, refusing to surrender, snarling that Druna had no cowards. They killed him, and the other wounded quickly. Then Demon Steward appeared at the alley entrance on his griffin, covered in blood and battle damage, blue eyes blazing with genuine fury. Not at the enemy, at these men. The Empire's sword wins glory and victory, he snarled. It doesn't slaughter unarmed civilians or loot corpses. Get out of my sight. If I catch you doing this again, I'll deal with you personally. The soldiers scrambled away in terror. Demon glanced at the dead veteran and the trembling civilians with cold indifference. Their fate didn't truly concern him, and flew back into the fighting. For him, war was where the strong proved themselves, not where the weak indulged their worst instincts. Night fell, but the fortress burned so bright it might as well have been day. In every corner of Iron Oak, steel was still meeting steel, lives were still being spent. The breach grinder kept pushing forward. The wall-top death dance continued. The street-by-street slaughter had no end in sight, and I stood in my camp, next to a wounded dragon whose glow pulsed weakly in the dark, surrounded by my knights, listening to the distant thunder of a war that would reshape everything, and wondering how many of those people dying on both sides tonight had ever had a real choice in any of it. The fighting finally died down at sunset, not from any truce but from pure exhaustion on both sides. The killing machine at the north wall breach ground to a halt. The Druna defenders pulled back, leaving mountains of dead behind them. The Empire had paid a terrible price too, but our flags now flew over the outer defense line. Imperial troops controlled the breach, most of the outer city streets, and several collapsed wall sections. Patrols moved through rubble and blood-soaked roads. But Iron Oak hadn't fallen completely. The Druna commander, Marquis Galford, had pulled his remaining forces into the inner city and up to the mountaintop core castle, where the last few magic towers maintained a weak, flickering shield over the final stronghold. On the walls, surviving soldiers from both sides huddled in whatever shelter they could find, eating hard rations and bandaging wounds. The front lines were so tangled that in some places, Imperial and Druna troops could see each other's campfires across a single street. An eerie quiet settled over everything, broken occasionally by a stray arrow or a dying man's last groan. Nobody had the strength for another push, or had simply fallen asleep, not ended. I hadn't slept at all. For an entire day and night, I stood guard beside the wingburner's massive head, watching over her while she healed. Her body pulsed, with dark red light, her own ancient dragon healing magic fighting the wither curse that clung to her wound like poison ivy. The gash was slowly closing, muscle knitting back together, but the green energy kept eating at the edges, blocking her regeneration. It was a brutal internal war happening beneath her scales. My knights held an iron perimeter around her. Nobody got within 100 meters. Not curious soldiers, not officers, not even Legion couriers. They had to shout their messages from a distance after feeling the killing intent radiating from our defensive ring. Barton ran the guard rotations without rest, his face carved from stone. Late that night, Demon Steward appeared at our perimeter. This time he wasn't alone. Soldiers behind him carried heavy supply crates. He'd changed into clean clothes, looking relaxed and victorious, though his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Farnell," he called out, more serious than usual. "Looks like your partner's stabilizing. I brought some top-grade healing potions. Don't know if they work on dragons, but consider it a gesture." I nodded and thanked him briefly. He waved his men back and stepped closer, studying the wingburner's massive form with calculating interest. Wither magic is nasty, he said. We've lost plenty of griffins to it. Most don't survive. Your dragon will need at least another day or two to move, right? I said nothing, which was answer enough. He continued, dropping useful intelligence wrapped in his usual casual tone. The general had decided to launch the final assault on the mountaintop castle at dawn tomorrow. Artillery bombardment, first to weaken the remaining shield, then a ground assault. He grinned and asked if my big lizard would be ready for a rematch. Another competition to see who cracked Galfert's last shell first. I gave him a vague answer. If she recovered, we'd fight. Then, as he turned to leave, he dropped his voice and said something that wiped the smile off my face. Watch yourself. A lot of eyes are on your camp tonight. Dragon blood, dragon scales, dragon bone. Plenty of people find those very interesting. He smiled meaningfully and disappeared into the darkness. I stared after him, head throbbing. His warning wasn't paranoia. A wounded, immobilized dragon was a treasure trove of rare materials. And in an army full of desperate, greedy, and opportunistic people, that made us a target. After Demon left completely, the wingburner's nostrils suddenly blasted out twin jets of white-hot steam, filling the air with sulfur. I jumped. Filthy insects, daring to covet me. Her mental voice slammed into my head. Not weak anymore, but burning with outrage and cold, killing intent. She'd been awake the entire time. She'd heard every word Demon said. I rushed to her head, all the worry and exhaustion and fear of the past day pouring out at once. You're awake? Your wound. How is it? Is it healing? She seemed briefly surprised by how openly desperate I sounded. Her golden eyes focused on my haggard face, and she made a rumbling sound that was hard to read. Insect, what are you expecting? You think this scratch could stop me? She tried to move her injured leg to prove her point, but a flash of pain made her snarl involuntarily. That annoyed her even more. These irritating spells will be gone by sunrise. My fire will burn them clean. Despite the terrible attitude, the information made my heart soar. By dawn, the wither magic would be purged. She'd be combat ready. That's incredible, I blurted out, actually reaching forward and pressing my palm against her warm, rough snout before I could stop myself. I knew it. I knew you'd pull through. She shook her head to dislodge my hand, mental voice dripping with disdain. Stop making that ridiculous face, insect. This kind of injury isn't worth your pathetic fussing. I didn't care about her attitude. I was grinning for the first time in 2 days. As long as she recovered, everything else was manageable. Every threat, every schemer, every political trap, none of it mattered against the simple equation of having a dragon on your side. Then her mood shifted to something darker. Her golden eyes locked onto the faint glow of Iron Oak's mountaintop castle in the distance, and her mental voice turned to molten fury. The insect who shot me is already ash. But this debt isn't settled. That shell on the mountain, I'm going to destroy it. Every creature inside who dared raise a weapon against me will burn. This humiliation will be washed away in blood and fire. Dragon aura flared around her, making the nearby horses stamp nervously and Barton's head snap toward us. I matched her energy without hesitation. Absolutely. When you're ready, we burn it all. She roared low with satisfaction, and the red glow across her body seemed to brighten. In that moment, standing beside a wounded dragon who shared my anger and my enemies, the fragile bond between us felt stronger than it ever had. Demon's warning still echoed in my mind. Hidden eyes were watching, but with the wingburner recovering, I felt confidence replacing fear. Let them watch. Let them scheme. When she took to the sky again, all their plots would crumble against the simple, brutal reality of absolute power. Elsewhere that night, 2 very different scenes played out. Inside Iron Oak's command room, Marquis Galfort stood alone over his sand table, watching the black imperial flags closing in around his last green marker. He was wrestling with the hardest decision of his life. Fight to the last man in a doomed fortress, or find some way to preserve the lives under his command. He called for an emergency meeting of all officers. Something was about to change. And in the imperial command tent, General Antonio was celebrating. Wine flowed, toasts were raised. Officers discussed tomorrow's final assault and the treasures supposedly hidden in Iron Oak's vaults. The mood was victory assured. Demon sat apart, bored by the festivities, his mind clearly elsewhere. Antonio's gaze occasionally drifted to the empty seat reserved for the Riendort contingent, and a flicker of calculation crossed his face. The dragon and its young master were variables he hadn't fully accounted for. The night stretched long and sleepless for everyone who held power. Iron oak burned in the darkness, its flames flickering like the restless souls of the fallen, while both sides prepared for what dawn would bring. The attack came in the darkest hour before dawn, when everyone thought the battle was already won. Marquis Galfort, the Druna commander, had been planning this all night. While the Imperial army slept in exhausted victory, he stripped off his decorations, put on battered combat armor, and gathered his last 3,000 cavalry, the Broken Antler riders. Every one of them wounded, armor cracked, but eyes burning with the same fire as their commander. They knew they weren't riding out to survive. They were riding out to die, so that everyone else inside the fortress could live. The castle gates cracked open just enough for horses to file through. No trumpets, no drums. Just Galfort charging out first, straight down the mountain slope, slamming into the Imperial perimeter at its weakest, most exhausted moment. The effect was devastating. Soldiers still asleep were trampled before they could open their eyes. Others stumbled out of tents half-dressed, grabbing whatever weapon was closest. Panic spread like wildfire. But I had to give the Imperial regulars credit. Even caught completely off guard, their training kicked in. They didn't scatter. They clustered around the nearest officers and flags, forming rough defensive knots with shields and bodies, trying to slow the avalanche. Galfort's target was clear, the central command camp, straight at General Antonio's headquarters flag. His greatsword carved through everything in his path. He split an Imperial centurion in half. Man, shield, everything, without breaking stride. His riders followed like a burning spear thrust deep into the army's gut, hurling torches at supply dumps and tent rows as they charged. Fires erupted everywhere, turning the pre-dawn sky orange. Along the way, Galfort personally engaged a 9th Legion vice commander, smashing through his guard and nearly splitting his shoulder to the bone in a single exchange of blows. The man was dragged away by his bodyguards, critically wounded and out of the fight. I woke to the thunder of hooves and screaming. Barton was already standing outside my tent like an iron statue. Every Riendort knight was armed and mounted before I could finish pulling on my sword belt. Druna breakout. Main thrust aimed at the center, Barton reported, voice tight. I ran to the camp's edge and watched the chaos unfold. I could trace Galfort's charge by the trail of fire and death cutting through the Imperial lines. Carl asked if we should join the fight. I could see the eagerness in his eyes. I made the cold calculation. Hold position. Nobody moves without my order. Barton, tighten the perimeter. It was the right call, even if it didn't feel heroic. We were on the camp's edge, not under direct attack. My 120 knights were irreplaceable. They were my entire power base, my future, everything. Throwing them into a chaotic night battle where nobody could tell friend from enemy would be reckless stupidity. And the wingburner, still healing behind us, was the asset I absolutely could not risk. Every other noble private army commander on the perimeter made the same choice. Hunker down, protect your own, don't get pulled into the meat grinder. Demon Stewart made the opposite choice, because Demon Stewart was a different kind of animal entirely. I heard his voice booming across the camp even, from this distance, laughing about Galfort's last party. Within minutes, hundreds of Griffin Knights were airborne, white gold streaks diving into the heart of the fighting. For Demon, this was the perfect opportunity. Maximum chaos meant maximum glory for whoever stabilized the situation. Meanwhile, Galfort's charge was finally grinding to a halt. 3,000 had become less than 500. They were deep inside enemy lines, surrounded on all sides by troops pouring in from every direction. The horses slowed. The momentum died. Individual courage couldn't overcome the sheer mass of bodies pressing in from every angle. Galfort fought like something out of legend. Even from my distant vantage point, I could see the arc of his greatsword catching firelight, each swing slower but still lethal. Then his horse went down. An Imperial veteran rolled out from behind a barricade and hacked through the animal's front leg with a cleaver. Galfort tumbled free, killed the man with a sweeping cut that split him in two, but ended up on one knee. His bodyguards tried to reach him, but were swallowed by the press of Imperial soldiers. 5 or 6 spears found him at once, punching through his battered scale armor from multiple angles. He looked down at the shafts buried in his body, then looked up, past the chaos, past the flames, toward Iron Oak's peak and the homeland beyond. His sword fell from his hands. His eyes went distant, carrying something that looked less like defeat and more like a man finally setting down a burden he'd carried too long. He died 500 steps from General Antonio's command tent, that close to cutting the head off the snake. And while Galfort pulled every Imperial eye toward the center, the real plan unfolded. The fortress's side gates opened and tens of thousands of Druna survivors, soldiers, wounded, mages, officers, poured out in 2 massive streams, east and north, hitting the thinnest points of the Imperial encirclement. The eastern group smashed through a second-line legion's blockade in a desperate, bloody surge. The northern group exploited the gap left by Demon's Griffin Knights being drawn to the center. By the time the Imperial command recovered from the shock of Galfort's attack and redirected pursuit forces, huge numbers of Druna troops had already scattered into the surrounding hills and forests like water soaking into earth. Dawn came. Sunlight revealed the full scope of what had happened. The area around the Imperial command camp was a wasteland of burning tents, scattered equipment, and bodies stacked in layers, mostly Imperial soldiers caught unprepared, mixed with the fallen Broken Antler riders. Antonio stood under his headquarters flag, face like iron, staring at Galfort's corpse laid before him. He'd won the campaign. Iron Oak Fortress was taken, but nearly half the garrison had escaped. His own camp had been penetrated. His vice commander was critically wounded. What should have been a triumphant conclusion looked more like a humiliation. Demon landed his griffin nearby, armor freshly scratched and bloody, wearing the expression of a man who'd just had the time of his life, but was disappointed he hadn't personally killed the main boss. He glanced at Galfort's body and shrugged. Shame. Wanted to take that old stag's head myself. In our camp, I watched it all end and slowly released my grip on my sword. My knights were untouched. The Wingburner had healed undisturbed through the entire crisis. I'd protected what mattered. Galfort's sacrifice play had been brilliant, one of the most effective tactical maneuvers I'd ever witnessed. 3,000 men traded their lives so that tens of thousands could escape to fight another day. The man died a hero, even if the Empire would never call him one. I thought about his final charge and about Duke Stannis before him. 2 Druna commanders, both discarded by their own kingdom in different ways, both choosing how to spend their last moments. The comparison to my own situation wasn't lost on me. The difference was, I intended to never be in a position where dying was my best remaining option. As the morning sun hit the Wingburner's black scales, the dark red healing glow across her body pulsed in rhythm with the light. I could feel her power building back toward full strength. She was almost ready. The fortress had fallen, but the war was far from over. The Empire would push forward, chase the escapees, consolidate gains. And I'd be dragged along, whether I liked it or not. But at least I still had my knights, my dragon, and my life. In this world, that was more than most people could say after a night like this. Iron Oak had fallen, but the mood in camp was far from celebratory. The aftermath of Galfort's suicide charge hung over everything like smoke that wouldn't clear. Burned tents, fresh graves, a wounded vice commander, and the bitter knowledge that more than half the garrison had escaped into the wilderness. All of it turned what should have been a triumph into something that tasted like ashes. I spent the morning watching the Wingburner's final recovery. The moment I'd been waiting for arrived right before my eyes. The green wither energy clinging to her wound made a faint hissing sound, like ice thrown into fire, and dissolved completely. Then the massive gash started closing, muscle knitting together, new dragon skin stretching across exposed bone, scales regenerating over raw flesh. Within minutes, all that remained was a long, pale scar running from her inner thigh to her wing root. A battle mark, but nothing more. Her eyes snapped open, golden, fierce, and absolutely furious. Dragon aura flared outward in a brief, uncontrolled pulse that made every horse in the area scream and every knight grab their weapons. She was back. How do you feel? I asked, not bothering to hide my relief. She tested her healed leg, flexing the new muscle. A satisfied but vicious growl rolled from her throat. As if mere wither magic could kill me. She was trying to sound dismissive, but I could sense the lingering resentment underneath. Being wounded had deeply offended her pride. She immediately wanted to fly to the fortress and burn whatever was left. I had to talk her down. The main Druna force had already escaped during the night. What remained inside was probably just traps and scattered holdouts. Charging in now meant doing the Empire's dirty work for free, clearing booby traps and hunting stragglers while the real glory and loot got divided up by others. Your fire should be saved for targets worthy of you, I told her, not wasted on an empty shell. She called me a cunning insect, but accepted the logic. Her pride demanded that her power be displayed at the most impressive moment, not squandered on cleanup duty. But she made it clear, if anyone from the Imperial side annoyed her or made demands, she'd burn them along with everything else. Then came the War Council. The meeting was held in an enormous tent near the Central Command area, packed with hundreds of officers, nobles, and commanders. My seat was at the very back, practically at the entrance, dead last in the hierarchy. A freshly appointed viscount from a disgraced family, with no political connections and no seniority, didn't rate anything better. The only reason I'd been invited at all was because of the Wingburners' performance yesterday. Classic Imperial treatment. Use you when they need you, forget you exist when they don't. I sat quietly in my corner, not bothered by the slight. The Wingburner sat beside me in her human form, dragon horns, golden slit eyes, black scale armor dress, drawing stares from every direction. She had zero interest in the proceedings. What she was interested in was the food. The victory banquet spread was impressive: roasted venison, honey-glazed white bread, pitchers of red wine. The Wingburner attacked it all with terrifying efficiency. She tore through meat with her sharp nails, swallowed pieces barely chewed, demolished bread rolls 2 at a time, and drank wine straight from the pitcher, red liquid trailing down her chin. And she was territorial about it. When a serving girl tried to cut me a slice of venison, those golden eyes swiveled over with a look that clearly said, "That's mine." The girl froze. I waved her away. I pushed my own untouched plate toward the Wingburner without a word. She took it without thanks and kept eating. So I sat there nursing half a cup of wine on an empty stomach, listening to the Empire's finest argue about what to do next. The debate was fierce. General Antonio sat at the head table looking like a thundercloud, barely touching his food, drinking hard. The previous night's humiliation was eating him alive. His camp penetrated, his vice commander nearly killed, the enemy slipping through his fingers. The Hawks wanted immediate pursuit. Cavalry commanders and glory-hungry young nobles demanded they chase the fleeing Druna forces before they could regroup. The Doves pushed back hard. The army was exhausted, horses needed rest, supply lines were disrupted, and nobody knew what traps might still be hidden inside the fortress. The logistics officers pointed out that soldiers who'd fought all day and been ambushed all night could barely stand, let alone chase enemies through unfamiliar hills and forests. The fortress itself was another headache. Reports were coming in about suspicious magical energy readings in the inner city, possible delayed trigger traps. The tunnel network under the mountain connected to old mining shafts in unknown ways. There could still be hidden defenders. Nobody wanted another nasty surprise after what Galford had already done to them. Demon Stewart sat near the front, arms crossed, wearing his usual smirk, clearly enjoying watching everyone else squabble. He only spoke up when someone mentioned the Griffin Knight's potential role in pursuit, and even then his comments were vague and noncommittal. He was waiting to see which way the wind blew before committing to anything. Smart. I kept my mouth shut throughout. I had no standing in this room, no allies, no political weight. Speaking up would only make me a target. I watched, listened, and filed information away. Eventually Antonio slammed his fist on the table and shut everyone up. His orders were blunt. No large-scale pursuit for now, but send rotating cavalry patrols to harass and exhaust the fleeing enemy. The main army would rest in place. The fortress would be thoroughly swept. Every room, every tunnel, every mouse hole, within 3 days. Anyone who failed to meet that deadline would face military justice. No mention of rewards or promotions. That would wait until the situation was fully stabilized. The meeting ended on a sour note. Officers filing out in clusters, still arguing in lowered voices. I set down my empty wine cup and started to stand. Then a staff officer walked straight to my corner. Viscount Farnell re-endured. The general requests that you remain behind. Every nearby, I turned toward. Me and the wing burner, who was just finishing the last piece of meat and delicately wiping her lips with one clawed fingertip, completely unconcerned. The general wanted a private word. That meant he wanted something. And the only thing I had that he could possibly want was currently licking venison grease off her fingers next to me. I sat back down and waited. After the victory feast ended, General Antonio's aide told me to stay behind. The wing burner announced she'd wait outside. She had zero patience for boring insect meetings and walked out through a crowd of staring nobles without caring about any of them. I followed the aide to a private tent behind the main hall. Antonio was waiting in casual clothes, studying a wall map, looking exhausted but sharp-eyed as ever. He got straight to business. The Druna survivors who'd escaped during Galfert's breakout were scattered through the surrounding hills and forests. The Imperial Army needed rest. The Griffin Knights were worn out. But someone had to patrol the outer perimeter, keep the enemy remnants from regrouping or harassing supply lines, and crush any small groups that got too bold. That someone, naturally, was me and the wing burner. Her mere presence was the ultimate deterrent. Nobody would dare approach an area patrolled by a dragon. I saw this coming a mile away. Free labor, maximum risk, zero reward. I pushed back politely, pointing out that dragon breath left nothing behind. No prisoners, no intelligence, no loot. And my 100-odd knights couldn't hold against a major counterattack if the remnants grouped up. Antonio brushed off the loot concern with a wave. Whatever you find, keep it. The Legion won't ask questions, right? Fleeing soldiers dump everything heavy. There'd be nothing worth finding. Then came the sweetener, and I used that word very loosely. He offered me reinforcements. Nearly 1,000 men, he said, to bolster my numbers. A soldier named Greystone was brought in. He was thin, yellow-faced, wearing patched rags that might once have been a uniform, and he hit the floor on his knees the instant he entered, trembling. Antonio casually announced that Greystone and his 973 men were now mine. The Auxiliary Battalion. My heart sank through the floor. Auxiliary Battalion was a polite name for a slave army. War prisoners, criminals, debtors, society's discards shoved into uniform and used as expendable cannon fodder. Starving, untrained, undisciplined, equipped with rusty knives and sharpened sticks. Not reinforcements. A millstone around my neck. Antonio dressed it up with talk about trust and testing my ability. I wanted to throw something. This wasn't a gift. It was a punishment disguised as generosity. Accept and struggle, or refuse and be labeled insubordinate. No real choice at all. I bit down hard and accepted. As you command. When I walked out with Greystone shuffling behind me like a beaten dog, I was furious. Barton took one look at my face, then at Greystone, and his expression matched mine perfectly. I told him to take me to see these troops. What I found was worse than my worst imagination. Nearly 1,000 people crammed into a filthy patch of ground with no proper tents. Just rags, grass piles, and bare dirt. They were skeletal, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that barely counted as clothing. Their weapons were a joke. Rusted cleavers, pointed sticks, farming tools. Most of them didn't even look up when I arrived. They just curled tighter into themselves, like animals expecting another beating. The wing burner had followed. She surveyed this scene of human wreckage with pure disgust. This is your new toy insect? A pile of stinking, useless garbage. Planning to defeat the enemy by making them vomit from the smell? I ignored her and made the only decision I could. I pulled 20 of my knights out and assigned each one to command a squad of about 50 slaves. I told Greystone to split his people up accordingly. The knight's word was my word. Disobey and die. Those 20 knights looked at me like I'd sentenced them to hell. One actually tried to beg off. Barton shut that down with one devastating line. You don't want to go? Should I go instead? Nobody argued after that. They marched off to their new assignments looking like men walking to their own executions. The days that followed were a nightmare. Training these people was like trying to build a house out of wet sand. They couldn't form a line. They couldn't follow basic commands. They panicked at loud noises. Some tried to run. Others fought each other over moldy bread. One knight reported that his squad whimpered like wounded animals at night. Barton told me what I already knew. This wasn't working. The 20 assigned knights were burning out, just maintaining basic order. Forget about actual combat training. The wing burner kept her distance from the slave camp, claiming the smell was unbearable. From her perch on the fortress ruins, she'd occasionally glance down and deliver scathing commentary through our mental link. Are you building an army or collecting the continent's most worthless refuse? That one can't even hold his stick straight. I doubt he'll survive breakfast. Maybe try luring them with food? They seem more responsive to your black bread than your knights shouting. I was close to going back to Antonio and demanding he take his gift back. Then the wing burner accidentally solved the problem. One afternoon, apparently out of pure boredom, she wandered over to the edge of the slave camp. She watched the chaos for a moment, golden eyes glinting with mischief. Then she picked up a handful of pebbles. She started throwing them. Not with dragon strength. That would have killed people, but with terrifying precision. One stone cracked into the wrist of a man stealing food from his neighbor. He screamed and rolled on the ground. Another stone hit the backside of someone hiding in the crowd to sleep, launching him into the air. A third stone struck the forehead of a troublemaker who'd been snarling at a knight, and it killed him instantly, his skull splitting open. She looked like a child flicking marbles at ants. Casual, amused, enjoying herself. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Every single slave froze. Not because of shouting or whips, they'd grown numb to those. But this beautiful, terrifying woman standing 50 meters away could pick any one of them out of a crowd and in them whenever she felt like it. And she was smiling while she did it. The primal terror of an apex predator settled over the camp like a blanket. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The 20 knights, who'd been losing their minds trying to establish basic order, stood there slack-jawed as their impossible charges suddenly became statues. An absurd idea took shape in my head. I walked over to the wing burner, who was tossing another pebble up and catching it, looking pleased with herself. They seem to respond better to your communication style, I said carefully. She preened. Obviously, dealing with garbage requires the most direct approach. Much more effective than your soft methods, wouldn't you say? I swallowed my pride. Could you occasionally help me manage them? Just like what you did now. A reminder when they get out of line. It was insane. Having a dragon discipline slave soldiers was like using a volcano to light a candle. People might die, but everything else had failed, and doing nothing meant this entire group would rot and drag me down with them. She studied the terrified slaves, then studied my face, the exhaustion, the frustration, the barely hidden plea, and seemed to find the whole situation entertaining enough to participate in. Fine. Since you're begging so sincerely, I'll occasionally watch your garbage pile. But remember, insect, you owe me again. Yes, yes, I owe you again, Your Majesty, I said, playing along while my mind was already racing ahead. Fear alone wouldn't build a functioning unit. I'd need to combine the wing burner's terror with rewards for good behavior, food, better equipment, maybe even the promise of freedom. The stick was covered. Now I needed the carrot. But at least, for the first time since Antonio dumped this disaster on me, the slave camp was quiet. That was a start. I wasn't there for any of this, obviously. I was hundreds of miles away, dealing with slave soldiers and imperial politics. But I learned enough about the Riendort family's dragon situation from the original Farnell's memories, and from what I pieced together later, to understand just how absurd my situation really was. Back at the family dragon nest deep in the Dragonspine Mountains, my supposed partner Stimp was waiting for me. She was a silver dragon, over 200 meters long even in her youth, and she was lying on what she considered a humiliatingly thin layer of gold coins and scattered gems. By dragon standards, her bed was poverty. She could barely roll over without touching bare rock. The reason for her financial embarrassment was simple. The Riendort family was essentially broke. Or more accurately, every coin they earned got funneled straight into dragon throats. This was the dirty secret behind the Great Dragon Taming Dynasty. The whole arrangement between House Riendort and the dragons wasn't some noble bond of warrior and beast. It was a business deal, one that had been bleeding the family dry for centuries. The original agreement, struck by some ancestor called Blackblade, elect Riendort, was straightforward. The family would serve as the dragons, wealth collection agents, in the human world. They'd fight wars, conquer territory, and loot everything shiny. In return, Dragons would partner with family members as mounts and combat assets. Young dragons looking to build their first horde were especially eager participants. Sounds like a fair trade, right? Except dragon greed has no ceiling. A young dragon wants a pile of gold to sleep on. An adult dragon wants a mountain of treasure. An ancient dragon needs an entire magically expanded cavern system filled with wealth that could buy several kingdoms. And they're competitive. The moment one dragon sees a neighbor with a bigger horde, the pressure on their human partner doubles. This created what people privately called the dragon financial vortex. The family fought wars primarily to generate loot for their dragons. After every campaign, the best and shiniest portion went straight to the dragons as tribute. What remained for actually running the family, maintaining territories, paying soldiers, building infrastructure, living like proper nobles, was scraps. The empire had a famous joke about it. Some emperor, after the re-endured duke came asking for more military funding, reportedly told his ministers, "Well, it seems our dragon tamers have come." Begging again, cruel, but accurate. The family adapted by converting wealth into forms dragons couldn't easily covet. Weapons, equipment, food stockpiles, infrastructure investments. Nothing shiny. They'd even hide money in distant ventures far from dragon eyes. But it was never enough. And then there were the retired dragons. Once a dragon decided it had accumulated enough treasure, it would simply stop working. It would haul its hoard deep into the mountain, curl up on its gold pile, and sleep for centuries. These retirees occupied the best lairs, guarded fantastic wealth, and contributed absolutely nothing to the family's military power. Over generations, more and more dragons had entered this state, which was the real reason the family's combat strength had been declining. The cost of deploying an active dragon was staggering too. Massive food consumption, magical crystal supplements, risk of injury that could bankrupt the family to treat, and the ever-present danger of losing a priceless asset. So the family leadership avoided sending dragons into battle unless absolutely necessary, which further reduced their reputation as a military powerhouse. Stimp, my assigned dragon, was a perfect example of the system's dysfunction. She'd chosen me as her partner, not out of affection, but because she'd used a rare silver dragon prophecy ability and glimpsed visions of my future. She'd seen me standing over vast territories, with endless wagon trains of treasure rolling toward a magnificent dragon lair built to her exact specifications. She'd heard titles like Dragon Lord and Eastern Guardian and White Flame King associated with my name. She'd seen wealth beyond imagination, all destined, in her mind, for her claws. And this is where things get really interesting. The next part is already on Patreon. Don't want to wait? Watch it right now. Link in the description and pinned comment.